I want to thank you all and welcome you for participating in what has been an exciting 3 nights of conversations with candidates from across North Carolina in various capacities, vying for titles that are respective to Wake County in this midterm election. This candidate forum is hosted annually by the Raleigh Wake Citizens Association. And in this midterm election cycle, we have been fortunate enough to hear from candidates from various offices. If you're just joining tonight for night 3, you have already missed the United States House, North Carolina Senate, North Carolina Supreme Court, Wake County Commission, Board of Education, North Carolina District Court Judge. And tonight, you are fortunate enough to hear from candidates vying for the North Carolina Senate, Raleigh City Council, and last but not least, the Soil and Water Conservation Commissioner for this district. We're going to first start with candidates for North Carolina Senate. First candidate, Matthew Lazix. I want to make sure I'm pronouncing that last name correctly.
It's Lazak, but that's close enough.
All right, Matthew, thank you for joining us. I also want to introduce the moderators for this evening. We have several other moderators that will be joining us. And of course, as we stated earlier, due to traffic and probably other technical difficulties, we may not be able to get them in right now for introductions, but we'll introduce them as we move forward. First up, we have Brother Richard Moore and Brother Michael Leach. Brother Richard Moore is an active member in the city of Raleigh, has been very engaged in business and economic interests within the city, incubating and supporting small businesses, and is a member of Alpha Phi Alpha fraternity, where he serves as the director for Voteless People is a Hopeless People. Brother Michael Leach has been active in city and state government, and on a local level has been very involved in RWCA, is currently serving as the president for the former president of the Raleigh Wake Citizens Association, and are thankful to have his leadership tonight. Gentlemen, I will let you take the floor for the first round of questions.
Brother Bass, may I ask, are there other Senate candidates that should be on this panel as well?
Let me do a quick check. I have promoted the ones that have been confirmed and waiting for candidate Baker and for candidate Blue. I do see some individuals that have raised their hand in the chat, so I am going to promote them very quickly as well.
And I did receive a message that Dan is running late.
All right, I see no more hands in the chat, and we do have several additional candidates in. I will turn it back over to you, Brother Leach.
Good afternoon, everyone. And thank you so much for taking time to join us. You will have a minute to introduce yourself. Following the introductions, a panel of individuals will ask questions. We will alternate those questions and proceed as such. At this time, we will ask if you will take a minute for your opening statement, and we will begin with Matthew.
Thank you very much. My name is Matt Lazak. I'm running for North Carolina General Assembly District 14. I'm running on a platform of returning choice to the citizens of North Carolina and my district. What I mean by that is choice in how we live our lives, who we live our lives with, how we work, how we earn a living, what schools we send our children to. So that's my platform.
Thank you, Matthew. Jay?
Hey, good evening, everyone. It's an honor and pleasure to be with you all. My name is Jay Chaudhary. I serve as the senator for District 15, and I'm really running for the same reason I ran for the state Senate 6 years ago, and that's to make sure that every North Carolinian has a shot at the American dream the way my parents did when they immigrated here more than 50 years ago. Those issues for me in the General Assembly have included everything from pushing for affordable housing, which is important in our Senate district, voting rights and criminal justice reform. But I will tell you that it's not lost on me that the history of this organization, the history of the Black community is really one which is a son of immigrants I really stand on the shoulders of, because as a history lesson, the Immigration and Nationality Act of 1965 would have never passed without the Civil Rights Act of 1964 passing. Both of those federal legislation be viewed together. And I'm grateful to be here with you tonight and look forward to answering any questions.
Thank you. Lisa?
Much, Michael. Hi, I'm Lisa Grafstein. I'm running for the North Carolina Senate in North Raleigh, which is District 13. It's a new seat, it's an open seat. I've already been endorsed by RDBCA in the primary, so I appreciated that, and it was very beneficial and helpful to me, and I do appreciate working with you all. I've been a civil rights lawyer for 27 years, and I've worked in the areas of labor and employment discrimination and wage issues, as well as the last 11 years working on issues of disability rights for people across the state who have disabilities. The main issues that I'm running on are economic justice issues, which encompasses a lot, as you all know, including access to public education and good jobs, healthcare, which has a whole array of issues, including Medicaid expansion, as well as Jay said, voting rights, which is really the cornerstone of all of the rights that we need to exercise in a democracy to have the other good things that we want to get. So I'm happy to be here. I'm happy also if you want to sort of, since I've been through this before, I'm happy to answer more questions from you, or if you want to focus on others, that's fine. But I really do appreciate you all and what you do.
Thank you. Ryan?
Hi, my name is Ryan Brown, and I'm running for Senate District 18 as a Libertarian. I'm running to provide people of Northern Wake County and Granville County a third choice. I'm running on a platform of individual liberty and individual responsibility. As a Libertarian, not all of my solutions are going to be the sexiest solutions out there. I won't promise a lot of people money, and I won't promise to solve all your problems. But I do believe in the people of North Carolina and the people of Wake and Granville County, and I believe that they know what is best for their life, and that if we give them the freedom to do what they please peacefully, then they will have the best outcomes in their life possible. Thank you.
Thank you. Dee?
I'm Dee Watson, and I'm running in District 16. I'm a Libertarian, and I'm trying to move the power and decision-making in people's lives to them and away from the government bureaucrats. The issues that I'm focusing on are criminal justice reform, particularly transparency and accountability in the policing system. I'm also focusing on school choice, and really funding students, not systems, so that parents and families can make more decisions for their education of their children. And I'm also focusing on medical freedom. There's a lot of problems with corporate cronyism in the medical system with things like certificate of need laws and whatnot. So really, there is no free market for medical issues, and allowing one to exist. So, and I thank you very much for having me here tonight.
Thank you. And before we move on, has anyone else joined us for the Senate race?
I just did, Michael. Dan.
Thank you. Senator Blue, you have a minute and a half to provide a minute to provide an opening statement, if you will.
Excuse me. And thank you for having me. I appreciate you accommodating me by letting me be a little bit late. I'm lining up Zoom meetings. But anyhow, I'm Dan Blue. I am the current senator for Senate District 14. I serve as the Democratic leader in the Senate, and I'm involved in a multitude of issues, but one of the pressing ones right now that we're working on, as many of you know, is trying to make sure that healthcare is available to as many North Carolinians as we can make it available to, so that we would expand Medicaid, which would bring in an extra 700,000 North Carolinians under medical care. We've been negotiating and wrestling in the legislature, and the governor's been involved. We haven't done it. We got a lot to do. I'm also interested in making sure that we live up to the commitment that the court said that this state had in its constitution when it determined that every child in North Carolina is entitled to an adequate public education, so that we would adequately fund the Leandro decision and make sure that all kids can get a quality education. That decision is just as important for Wake County as it is for Hope County, because we got many needs. And so I'm going to keep pursuing that. And, you know, we still got a lot of issues with the environment, with climate. Now we're facing many allegations of you know, environmental racism and the way decisions are made where to put not necessarily PCB dumps in Warren County anymore, but making decisions on the issue with how we allow pig waste and all of those other kinds of things to be disposed of. And I think I've used a minute and a half, Michael, but I will be around to answer any other questions, and looking forward to a dialogue with you on a multitude of issues. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Again, we will ask a series of questions. You will have 2 minutes to respond to those questions. If I hold my finger up, that means that you will have 10 additional seconds to respond. If you continue, unfortunately, I will have to cut you off and we will move to the next candidate. Our first question will be asked by Richard Moore.
Okay. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for your time. Thank you for joining us this evening. My question is this. The NC Speaker of the House, Tim Moore, no relation to yours truly that I'm aware of, has filed a lawsuit called the Moore versus Harper that will be heard by the U.S. Supreme Court. The case is requesting that the U.S. Supreme Court hear arguments which would make the NC state constitution and state courts powerless in any decisions related to federal elections. And it seems that this would make the General Assembly have power with regards to deciding this. As a member of the General Assembly, you would then make decisions affecting the outcome of these federal elections. Please share your opinion on whether or not you believe that you as a legislator should have that authority.
Ryan, we will begin with you.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, that is a open legal question that there is a lot of controversy about, so I appreciate the question. It's a very difficult question, I'll be honest, because there are certain powers granted to the General Assembly when it comes to what they can do with redistricting. And as we saw in the 2020 election cycle, there were quite a few decisions made by the executive branch and the courts around the issue. Speaking strictly to the legal aspect of it, I am not qualified and I have not read up enough to read or to have an informed opinion on that necessarily. However, when it comes to redistricting issues, government has set themselves up in a way that will kind of ignore the people. And I think both the Democrats and the Republicans both seem to try and gerrymander a little bit, trying to get their own people in certain seats. So as a member of the General Assembly, I would like that practice to stop. And so I would actually support a redistricting process that is actually more fair and transparent and open to the citizens of North Carolina. And I believe that they should have significant public input with the opportunity to weigh in on proposed district maps, because it's high profile. It's a high stakes case, and there could be a lot of repercussions depending on how it's judged. So it's kind of a punt, it's a hard question, but at the same time, I think if we kind of reduce the power of government and have a more open and transparent system, then the issues of redistricting going forward won't be too bad. Thank you.
Thank you. We will toss to Dee.
Yeah, I think whenever you're addressing any question, there's a difference between what you have a right to do and what you should do. So the question is, does the General Assembly have a right to do this redistricting? And I think they do. But the way that they've done it is horrific. We need a commission that is nonpartisan, and it needs to include unaffiliated voters, and we need to take it out of the General Assembly's hand. Just because the General Assembly has a right to do it doesn't mean they should be doing it. They shouldn't be gerrymandering. So I would support removing it and allocating it to another organization. Thank you.
Thank you. Lisa.
Thanks. I'll be quick. I support a nonpartisan redistricting commission. I think that's there's a growing range of support for that sort of across the political spectrum, and I'm in favor of that. It will take, I think, a lot of effort in a constitutional amendment, but it's the right direction to be going. But to speak also to the issue of the case of Moore versus Harper, you know, we had that going on. We also have the Andrew hearing. So they were telling the Supreme Court, we have the supreme authority over this issue. They're telling the state Supreme Court that the courts can't even direct it. The state courts can't direct them in all range of areas. So I think that's a significant problem that that needs to be reined in. And I think that it starts with the redistricting piece, because that nonpartisan redistricting and getting away from gerrymandering enables us to get out of kind of the polarization that drives the swings in political actions that we're seeing right now. We're seeing extremes on the right that we need to rein in.
Thank you. Matthew?
So I agree with a lot of what has been said about moving districting to a nonpartisan approach. I will say that, you know, it's only gerrymandering when the other team is in charge of drawing up the district maps. So what I don't think we need to see is our Supreme Court making decisions like that on behalf of the voting public. So I do think that the General Assembly needs to work together to make this a nonpartisan issue and figure out how we can fairly and realistically draw those district maps.
Thank you. Is Dan still with us?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. And I think, Richard, that's a very good question. I agree totally with Lisa's position on this. I've been advocating an independent commission because I know that you can't have people drawing seats for themselves without basically trying to draw them to an advantage. And that's what we've been experiencing. But let me comment on the irony of where we are. It was North Carolina and the United States Supreme Court that convinced the court that the federal courts can't do anything about gerrymandering. It's a North Carolina case. So now the federal court can't do anything about partisan gerrymandering. They've wiped out the civil rights laws that said you could do something on the federal level about racial gerrymandering. And basically that's why we got the kind of districts we got now. And what they've done with the same leadership from the North Carolina General Assembly, Tim Moore, the Speaker, and Phil Berger, President Pro Tem in the Senate. They're the ones who made that argument 4 years ago, and the Supreme Court bought it. And the Supreme Court, in its opinion, said, we can't do anything about it, but states can, pursuant to their constitutions, do something about it. And that's what we got the cases reversed on the last time, under the state constitution, that they were unfair. So now they're going back to the same Supreme Court that's a little more conservative now than it was when they first went there, and saying, okay, you say that the state courts can do something about it 3 years ago. And we're coming to tell you, because of the independent state, independent legislative provision in the Constitution, state courts can't do anything about it either, even if it violates state constitutions. It is the most far-fetched, radical idea that I've run across in a long time, but it just shows you the thirst for absolute power. And that's what these folk are trying to grab, absolute power, so nobody can second guess them when they gerrymander, when they do all the stuff that Trump was trying to have folk do at the end of the elections last year, overturning the will of the people. That's what they want to do, because it applies not just to redistricting, it applies to anything legislatively relating to these federal elections. So I'm hoping that the Supreme Court at least will see the light enough on this issue that they won't go this step, that an overwhelming majority of law professors, all 50 of the chief justices of the 50 states in the country are saying, you don't need to do this, you ought not do it, you're taking power away from the people.
Thank you. Jay?
I think the answer has been shared really by Lisa and Dan. Number one, I've been on record and sponsored legislation to establish an independent redistricting commission because I believe that a commission to decide how we draw these districts, not politicians. But I just want to build on what Dan talked about the importance of the Harper v. Moore case that's going to be heard in October. I think that the case really has real consequences for what happens with elections in North Carolina, because essentially a bad decision by a majority of the United States Supreme Court would essentially render our state courts and our state constitution powerless in matters relating to federal elections. But, I think as Dan pointed out, there's a larger consequence and disaster in this space, because it could really nullify hundreds of election rules that we have. It could do away with vote by mail provisions that we have. And as Dan talked about, we could have a scenario, which is why this independent state legislative theory has been raised as troubling by, really, it seems like a consensus of lawyers, whether it's state Supreme Court justices or law professors, in which you could have the will of the people decide that they voted for one presidential candidate, but the legislature decide that they're not going to accept the will of the people in the state and award those electors for the losing candidate. And so I am very concerned about this case, and it's my hope that we have an outcome that still tries to uphold and preserve our system of checks and balances here at the state government level.
Thank you. With rent, property taxes, and home sale prices all rising, what, if anything, should the state legislature do to address the growing affordability crisis throughout North Carolina? So again, with rent, property taxes, and home sale prices all rising, what, if anything, should the state legislature do to address the growing affordability crisis? And we will start with Lisa.
Thanks for giving me the easy one first, Michael. I appreciate that. So I think there are a number of things that can be done at the legislative level. As you know, a lot of housing development, a lot of housing planning happens at the local level. But one of the things that I'm most concerned about, or one thing I'm significantly concerned about, are all these out-of-state investment firms coming in and buying up just tons of properties and driving up costs for people and making housing unavailable. And just a couple days ago, a teacher was posted something about needing to wanting to buy a townhome and being outbid by a cash offer from an out-of-state investment firm. This is somebody just trying to live in their own community. So I think we need to look at ways that we may be able to discourage those kinds of investments in our state, in part because it's driving down availability and driving up costs, but also because, when investment firms decide that they're going to go find a shiny new object to invest their money in, and they pull out of all the housing in an area, then you have a real problem with the housing bubble burst and the consequences for homeowners. So I think that's an important piece. I think there's a lot more control we can give at the local level, and I think it's somewhat controversial, but there are bigger levers that could be used at the local level to make it more feasible for city councils and local governments to require more affordable housing in the context of granting permits for building and development. So I think there are things we can do to sort of loosen up those restrictions, and that this is another area where I would look to more senior colleagues about what's feasible to get done in the short term, and also sort of long-term planning for when we have more ability to kind of move the needle on housing at the state level. I would also say, investing in the North Carolina Housing Trust is a huge thing that we need to be doing for affordable housing statewide. Thanks.
Ryan.
Yes, thank you. So on the issues of rent, property taxes, and home prices, some or many of these issues cannot really be solved in North Carolina alone. A lot of these issues are federal issues, things that are benefiting these big investors outside the state. So I don't believe there's a whole lot of things we could do to stop that. It is also well understood that price floors and price ceilings or supply controls will just cause shortages or worse quality housing. So I think we need to basically get the General Assembly out of any of the housing issues or any of the housing crisis aspects of this of aspects. Along with that, I don't think we should be throwing money at the issue, because a lot of people are throwing money at the issue, and that is one of the reasons why it is getting more expensive. I think a lot of the issues are zoning issues. So when it comes to housing, I think if we can get, and that's a local thing usually. So if we can get the local or the localities to allow for multifamily housing or other types of non-traditional single-family housing, that could cause some prices to come down. And then, yeah, I think I'm sympathetic to the issue, because as someone who grew up in North Raleigh, I went to App State and I wanted to move back to North Raleigh, and I had to move to North Raleigh up in Creedmoor, North Carolina. Right, and the housing market a year ago when I was trying to buy it was very, very high priced, and so I'm sympathetic to some of these issues. But I think the real solution is fewer zoning restrictions, fewer requirements and regulations, and then just in the end, more supply. Thank you.
Thank you, Ryan. Dan?
Thank you, Michael. You know, there are multiple approaches that we could take. I think Lisa hit some of them. We could empower local governments to, especially in rapidly developing places like Wake County, where the population is increasing so quickly and the housing stock just drives up, to sort of make greater trade-offs, charge a certain amount to allow certain kinds of development to go forth. But in addition to that, and many of you have heard me say that our Supreme Court 25 years ago talked about the state's obligation for a sound basic education for every student. If we were to properly fund education on a statewide basis, it would have an immediate impact on the property tax rates in Wake County. Wake County has had to raise its taxes tremendously because the state has basically targeted teachers and school expenditures. And in order to recruit teachers, to recruit personnel, the only place that the county can go is to increase the property tax. They can't increase the sales tax, have to increase the property tax. The second thing, Lisa mentioned the Housing Trust Fund. We ought to be much more deeply invested in not just the Housing Trust Fund, but many of the nonprofits across the state that do tremendous jobs in making housing available. We can't say it's something we didn't know about. At one point, we had multiple programs that were developing housing that had never done it, but contributed so much to the provision of housing primarily in the 90s and early part of this century. We're sitting on $6 or $7 billion in the state coffers. I've suggested all along that at this time of crisis, at least 20% of it should have been invested in trying to make housing more available to all of the citizens. That would be $1 billion and a half dollars. Basically put in the places where it's needed to help crank up the housing market, speed up the certification or the inspections and all of those things that local governments do. We've done it in every other area. It's about like the debate about President Biden's decision to eliminate a lot of student debt, and yet no criticism on eliminating a lot of corporate debt by incredible tax breaks or incredible stimulus money to do various things. It's the people.
10 seconds, please.
And so that's what I'm saying. There are places that we could go and ways that we could do it that I think would be much more effective. And it is going to cost some of the tax dollars that we could make available for it.
Thank you. Dee?
Hi, thank you for the question. This is simple supply and demand. I live in Cary and it has one of the most unaffordable housing situations in the state. Kitty corner to me, a house went up for sale, and across the street that weekend, there were lines to get in to see the house. We were told at noon when we got in that an offer had already been made. They were accepting offers till the next day at noon, and then they would select an offer. I think they each had like 4 offers within not even having the house up for 24 hours. So there's a huge housing shortage. No amount of money can fix a housing shortage. What fixes a housing shortage is more housing. The more housing you have, the lower the prices go. So we're in a horrific supply and demand situation here. And it's really clear that what's causing it, and I'm going to reiterate what Ryan said, it's being caused by zoning. Downtown, everywhere in Cary, you can't build an apartment complex that is more than, 4 stories. Zoning is killing us here, and we can't have more density because there's nowhere left to build. We have to go up. And zoning, permitting apartment complexes, multifamily units, these are things that people want to do, but the town won't let them. So the question is, should the legislature intervene? And it sounds, people are hesitant to have a higher government intervene on a lower government, and I understand that. But in this case, when you are respecting people's property rights and you're loosening zoning restrictions, you're moving the power from the town to the individuals. So this is really a property rights issue, and these zoning laws are really harming that. And people could solve this problem themselves just by building. We could build our way to housing affordability if we would get rid of some of these zoning restrictions. And we could have more affordable apartments if you have smaller apartments. The truth is that there's a lot of solutions here that can be solved just by building, and we can build our way out. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Dee. Matthew?
I want to build on the very good points that Dee made. And I also want to say this. I moved to Wake County in 2015 from Guilford County, from Greensboro. And this was already an issue for me, moving from out of the region into this region. So it's not like this is some new problem. The General Assembly has been aware of this for years. And so, we're not going to spend our way out of this issue because there's too many people coming into this county, just like me. I came here because there's work here. It's a great problem to have, but we have to build more housing. And more regulation is going to slow that process down. So that's not the answer. We can't possibly pull enough taxpayer funds out of, from the existing residents of this county to pay for more affordable housing. That might, if we're lucky, make a dent. We need to reduce the zoning laws and the regulations that prevent the marketplace from building the quantities and the types of housing that people need in Wake County. So again, if we had a plan for this 5 years ago when I moved here, we would have been able to cope with COVID and supply chain disruptions, which are causing the problem to be exacerbated. So no plan, nothing being done about it, same old zoning laws, same old heavy-handed government intervention. And guess what? Now we have a crisis, and we're not going to spend our way out of a crisis. The only way the General Assembly can help the situation is to make it easier for developers to build the quantities and the types of housing people need.
Thank you. And Jay? Jay, are you with us?
Yeah, I'm here. From my perspective, I think living in Wake County, affordable housing has to be one of the top issues that we're confronting. I will say, when I used to drive my daughter to middle school at Ligon, and if you drive through the neighborhoods there in Southeast Raleigh, I mean, you could literally see the gentrification transforming that neighborhood every single day. Pricing people in those residences in those neighborhoods, pricing them out of those neighborhoods because of increasing property taxes. And as someone who had attended a Wake County Commission meeting a few months ago, we've seen the concern from citizens about what's happening with the gentrification that we're seeing in these neighborhoods. To that extent, and this has been talked about by other candidates. I mean, I've sponsored legislation to double our affordable housing budget. I think that would roughly be an additional $50 million more, which is really not a lot when we're sitting on a $6 billion plus surplus. And I've also sponsored legislation to put in place a homestead exemption that would essentially reduce or freeze property taxes for long-term eligible homeowners to promote neighborhood stability and protect the character of those neighborhoods. Because, I think at the end of the day, certainly it's important that we bring new people into our communities, but we can't do so by running out the very people who have made these neighborhoods vital to our city's identity.
Thank you. Our next question will be asked by Richard Moore.
Okay, thank you. Okay, the question is this is going to change the theme a little bit. We live in a multicultural society, and the districts that you all seek to represent or be reelected to are multicultural to a degree. Have you participated in any diversity training that emphasizes multiculturalism and encourages the promotion of the belief in the principle that all people are equal and deserve equal rights and opportunities? If your answer is yes, just give us a brief description of what type of training it was. If no, will you commit to do so in the first 6 months after being elected, if you were to be elected?
We will start with Dan.
I've lived life preaching that and experiencing it and stuff, but I've done formal the lessons and taught in diversity practices, and basically done a whole lot of things trying to encourage other people to do it, sometimes statutorily, other times just the art of persuasion.
Thank you. Dee?
Not formal training, just life. And I think life is the best teacher. Thank you.
Ryan?
No, I have not done any diversity training formally, but I do believe that all people are equal, and I promise to govern that way.
Matthew?
So I work for $1 billion corporation. Of that $1 billion corporation, I'm responsible for a $70 million business unit. I have had multitudes of diversity training at the corporate level, but even more important than that, I have built diverse teams in my professional life. I have people from all races and genders and gender specifications working for me in a positive manner. And I would, definitely support what Dee and Ryan said, that equality before the law and everyone treated equally under the law is absolutely what I would strive for.
Lisa?
Thanks. Yeah, I've done the REI training, the Racial Equity Institute out of Greensboro, and I've also done a number of programs through work. We have an ongoing sort of racial caucusing group that is part of a larger DEI initiative. We've done also, the Me and White Supremacy sort of book group study sessions. So it's sort of an ongoing process, but I've done outside studying as well as those trainings. And I work in a disability field where that's another component of a lot of the training. We actually produce training for others on DEI in the context of disability.
Thank you. And Jay?
I have, in fact, done DEI training recently. The Dix Conservancy Board that I sit on has been doing DEI training and diversity training, which I think is also an important space when you look at government contracts and parks and resources. That's been part of the training, and Sherman Driver, who sits on the board, has been leading the racial equity team subcommittee that I am a part of. I've also been advising my daughter, who's now in high school, on her own DEI initiatives, in which I think she's trying to do a better job in building relationships with other communities of color. Because I think even within a multicultural society, even with students that come from different races and backgrounds, it's important that we see younger folks do that as well. I think if any of y'all joined us in the state Senate, I think you would see that our caucus is an exercise every day of trying to bridge and build differences, as it's led by Leader Blue here.
Thank you. One of the most pressing issues that we have before us is healthcare. Do you support the expansion of Medicaid, and if so, why or why not? And we'll start again with Jay.
Well, this is a no-brainer issue. Dan talked about it in his opening statement. Of course, I support the expansion of Medicaid. I mean, we're, I think, now one of only 11 states in the country not to have expanded Medicaid. We're talking about a healthcare coverage gap of 700,000 North Carolinians that don't have that coverage that we know has only gotten worse after the pandemic. And then I think that one of the things that we also lose sight of is the fact that it'll create 40,000 new jobs. But you know, I think some of the folks that should be most vested in making sure that we expand Medicaid are those that come from rural communities, because many of our rural hospitals are on the verge of collapsing or have collapsed because we haven't provided Medicaid expansion. So to answer your question, Michael, absolutely yes.
Thank you. Dee?
Yeah, I've actually written on this. There's a lot of problems with the Medicaid expansion. The first problem is that people who are making 100 to 138% of the federal poverty level would lose their subsidy. They would no longer be eligible. That's really problematic because if they're over 55, Medicaid is not free healthcare. Medicaid is a loan. In the state of North Carolina, under the current laws, if you're 55 and older, every time you spend $1 on Medicaid, the state keeps track of it, and they are supposed to come and take it from you when you die. This has really caused problems in places like Massachusetts. This isn't even being discussed. Okay, so for a farmer who is making 120% the federal poverty level, what would happen to that farmer is they would lose any subsidy that they have, and they would, even if they don't take Medicaid, like every time, if they take Medicaid, every time they go and spend money, a debt will be accrued and their children will not be able to inherit their farm. This isn't even being discussed, and we should discuss this first. The other problem is all of these predictions that they're making are not accurate. I have a degree in statistics. I've worked in pharma. I've worked at Duke as a statistician. When you model something and you're modeling prices, you have to be very careful, and you need clear data and endpoints. We do not have price transparency in the state of North Carolina. When you go to the hospital, you don't know how much it costs. Until we have price transparency, we cannot form accurate models. So you can't even accurately answer the question until you have those two things on the table for discussion. So there's no way I would entertain expanding it until we have price transparency, have gotten rid of certificate of need laws, and also talk about how we're going to deal with the 55 plus situation in North Carolina. Thank you.
Thank you. Lisa?
Yeah, I'm in favor of Medicaid expansion, and have been for a long time. As I mentioned a couple times, I work with people with disabilities. There are people who don't have insurance, and you know, all due respect, you know, we may not have perfect modeling. I'm not a statistician, but I know that we have, as Jay was saying, 700,000. That's a new number to me. I've been hearing 500,000 and 600,000. I guess the numbers are growing. That's the primary concern, is that we need to get people get coverage for people. Another, you know, issue that I really feel strongly about and have been talking a lot about is around behavioral health care services for people with mental illness and developmental disabilities, substance use disorder, traumatic brain injury. These are folks, many of whom are in that coverage gap. Some of whom are not in that coverage gap, but can access services because of various deficiencies in our behavioral health care system that I think we need to address. So we have a lot of issues to address in the healthcare arena. Medicaid expansion gives us the tools, not just to meet the needs of people who are uninsured at the moment, but also to invest money in the system to build up some of the areas in which even those who have insurance can't access adequate services. So I'm 100% in favor of Medicaid expansion and think we should be doing it yesterday.
Thank you. Ryan?
Yes, thank you. No, I am not in favor of Medicare expansion. In fact, I believe federal influence in our healthcare is both an immoral use of our taxpayer money, and I think it will actually make our problem worse. I'm a type 1 diabetic, and so I understand some of the problems we have in our healthcare system. And when it comes to rural hospitals, I was in Brevard, North Carolina, out west when I was diagnosed, and I don't even remember what hospital I went to. I was, basically unconscious. But at the same time, that hospital was just an awful. They were giving me treatments that were 10 years out of date. And so, what are the issues with that, or why? What are some of the root causes for that? Some of the root causes for that are certificate of need laws. Even the federal government repealed certificate of need laws because they realized just how bad they were for healthcare. And we currently have these laws in North Carolina. So along with what Dee said, we don't have price transparency, and we don't have an actual market for healthcare. Throwing more money and throwing more regulation and throwing more government overreach at a problem that is already heavily influenced and corrupted by government is not actually going to solve the problem of healthcare. I actually, as a hardcore libertarian, I don't believe in intellectual property rights. I don't believe in the FDA, and I think that people should be able to, put in their body whatever they want to. So whether or not that's legal marijuana or that's insulin created by a third party, whatever it is, as long as it's voluntary and peaceful, I'm okay with it. So I think once we get government out of the system itself, then we'll have a free market, and that free market is going to allow the prices to come down for all of our medical services. Thank you.
Thank you. Matthew.
Yeah, so I think that expanding Medicaid to able-bodied adults is a bad idea. Medicaid is meant to be a safety net for pregnant mothers, the disabled, people that really need it. And again, expanding access to the Medicaid program is not going to increase the supply of medical services. That is a limited resource, just like everything else that we're seeking to allocate efficiently to the people that need it. And the question here is, can the government do a better job of allocating scarce medical resources to everyone? And the answer is no, they can't. I think a lot of people would be surprised to learn how little of our health insurance dollars that we actually control. Most of it's controlled by either the government or our employer, and we're pulled out of that transaction. So we're not able to, have any market forces in our healthcare system, and that's the problem. So I think it's a bad idea. I think it won't work out, and I feel bad for the pregnant mothers and the disabled people that are going to have to compete for the scarce resources that they're already having a hard time getting now.
Thank you. Dan?
Jay and Lisa said what I would say. I'm in total agreement with their comments.
Thank you. And Richard, will you provide a closing comment or question for the panel?
Okay. Here's a closing comment. Why should anyone vote for you?
Certainly.
Put it out there.
Dan?
First, it would make me feel real good. But the second thing is, I laid out some things that I think we ought to be pursuing much more aggressively. I know Jay, because I've served with him a good while, and I've known Lisa a good while, believe as I do that government is created by the people for the benefit of the people, whether it is the way we structure ourselves to make sure that we live under the social compact by supporting law enforcement and ways that people are pulled back in when they get out of the traces. But I think that we can use government, and I think particularly state legislatures, since we constitute 90% of the government, along with local governments that affect people's lives, contrary to what they might think of the role of the federal government. But we can do better in educating our kids. We can do better by making sure we got the best qualified people to educate our kids the way we treat teachers. I tell people that in talking to the bank executives from across the state, most of them now are starting their workers at $22 per hour wages. a starting teacher, and that's before they go to college, before they incur $100,000 in debt. Most of our counties, the starting wage for new teachers in North Carolina is $37,000 versus $46,000 a year if you don't go to college, if you don't incur additional debt. Why should anybody become a teacher unless they really love it? And so if they really love it enough to go into it, we ought to respect them as professionals. We ought to give them the resources they need to better train our kids. So I think for a multitude of reasons, with providing health care for people in the state and providing decent education for their kids and giving them the directions and the instructions they need to get jobs so that they contribute for the rest of their lives.
Thank you. Ryan.
Yes, thank you. Why should anyone vote for me? I believe that I'm an honest guy and I'm not in it for the money. You know, my campaign has raised somewhere around $500, but my competitors in just one race have raised over $700,000. You know, part of the problem is we have too much government in our lives. There's no rational person that would spend $700,000 on a $14,000 a year job. The issue is control. And so the General Assembly and all the politicians in North Carolina have some sort of control over your life. And so I don't believe in that government control, which is kind of funny because I'm running for the position. But I believe that if people in North Carolina are free to contract peacefully with other people and they have their property rights respected, they will truly be able to flourish in the state of North Carolina. I have the absolute belief that everyone can succeed and do the best that they can, and that the only thing holding them back, or one of the only things holding them back, is the government of North Carolina. So if we have less government, less restrictions, less nonviolent crime, if we have people who are able to do their best, then we will get the best out of all of the people in North Carolina, and we will have a much more peaceful society because we won't be controlling, or we won't be fighting for the power to control other people. Thank you.
Thank you. Lisa.
Thanks. I appreciate it. I guess I want to echo Senator Blue. It would make me happy if you voted for, if people voted for me. I think it would also make Senator Blue happy because I'd love to go help him do the things that he and Senator Chaudhary are working on. So I would appreciate folks' support, and I ask for your support. I want to, just reflect on what Ryan said, and I think, money in politics, it really is a problem, and it's something that we should be talking about, and I think people are talking about and trying to think of solutions that that would comply with Citizens United, which is a problem. But I will say, like, a lot of folks run and they go through the trouble of raising insane amounts of money to spend to get a $14,000 a year job, and not because they want power, but because they want to make a difference in their community. And I know that some of the, there's a lot of cynicism in politics now, but I've been so grateful and happy to be able to be out campaigning alongside the senators here and some of the folks who are running and who have really kind of inspired me with their commitment to public service. And so I hope that folks will support me because I do share that vision and that hope for our communities, that we can really find solutions for each other and support each other in having good lives.
Thank you. Dee?
Hey there. Some of us, Ryan and I and some other people, we go to Gastonia, North Carolina once a month. And the reason that we're going is because the police there have basically made it, are trying to make it impossible for the homeless to live there. They arrested somebody for standing on a median and accepting food that was not solicited. They tased a veteran's service dog. They arrested a man with Black Lives Matter for standing too close to a courthouse, just filming, not blocking anybody, not doing anything. They're literally arresting people for standing in the wrong place on public property. That's what governments do when they want to make things better for the common citizen. What people like Ryan and Matt and I were doing, what we're doing is saying, We've had enough of that kind of government help. What I'm about is moving the power from the government to the individual. And I know a lot of you might think that you're advocating. A lot of people seem to think they're advocating to help people. But government helping people in Gastonia, North Carolina means that you have to take a BS plea deal to get your video released. It means that you can get arrested for standing in the wrong place because they just don't want you there. And where are these people supposed to stand? It's like they're not supposed to exist. I'm completely opposed to this kind of government. And I think all the people doing it are actually think that they're helping other people. But the thing is, it's not up to government to pick winners and losers. And when government's trying to help people, there's always a loser. And I don't think that those decisions should be up to government. And that's why I'm running. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dee. Matthew, please.
So I would like you to vote for me so that I can return the power of choice to you from government. You, the individual that knows best how to live your life, that knows best how to earn a living, to utilize your natural skills and ability. You that knows your children the best, knows how they need to be educated, what educational options would be the best for them. So I want to give you your tax dollars to spend on the school of your choice. Doesn't matter if it's public, private, micro school, community school, whatever that is, homeschool. You know best how to raise your children. You know best how to educate your children. So I want to give you that power of choice. I want you to feel like you live in a community that is safe. But for a lot of people and some people in my district, it might feel like you're living in a police state. This country isn't very free when you consider the egregious number of people that we put in cages every day. So I want to protect your rights as an individual. I want to protect your right to earn a living and choose how you do that. And I want to give you the power of choice over your educational dollars. And that's why you should vote for me. And it'll make me feel good.
Thank you. Jay?
Well, I hope that the voters will support me for a few reasons. One is I think as a representative of Senate District 15, that my office and my staff has been accessible to our constituents. As an example, during the pandemic and the difficulties that so many North Carolinians had trouble in trying to navigate the broken technology system and making sure that our citizens got unemployment benefits, our office helped more than 500 citizens across the state to make sure they got their unemployment benefits. And we frankly didn't ask those citizens whether they lived in our district or not, but making sure that we help our citizens is first and foremost my number one job. Secondly, I believe that I have represented and advocated on behalf of my constituency in my district, whether that means we invest more in public education, expand access to health care by expanding Medicaid, or making sure that we make voting easier and not harder, as this General Assembly has done. And finally, I'll just leave you with this. I think in my 6 years that I've served in the General Assembly, and certainly in those last 4 years as a Democratic whip and working closely with Leader Boo, I've come to realize that as we navigate a pretty partisan General Assembly, pretty partisan Senate, that it's important to be a team player as well within the Senate Democratic Caucus. And part of the reason that we've had success in upholding Governor Cooper's veto, and we want to protect that veto, is it's important to point out that while we're not passing bills that achieve that restore the progressive vision that we've had for the state of North Carolina, but we've stopped a lot of bad bills. We've stopped attacks on voting rights. We've stopped attacks on reproductive rights. We've stopped attacks on gun reform rights. And that's really been possible because we have today 22 Senate Democrats that vote and work together with the Governor Cooper. And that's really what separates us from Texas, Florida, and Georgia. And I think for those reasons, I hope the voters will send me back in this coming November.
Lisa, Ryan, Dan, Dee, Matthew, and Jay, thank you so much for being with us on this afternoon. We greatly appreciate the opinions and expressions that you have given us, and we will certainly take those into consideration. We wish you all a great evening and certainly a good night. Thank you again.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next race will be the Raleigh mayoral race. And when our moderator is available, will you let those candidates in, please?
Perfect. We are promoting panelists now for Raleigh mayoral race. The individuals that have already been RSVP'd and designated, we're promoting those at this time. If you'll give us a second, we'll do an audio video check and then turn the conversation back over to our moderators.
While we're waiting for those panelists to be promoted, let me apologize. I do see there's some questions in the chat that I failed to address. I can assure you that I will look more closely at the chat as we continue to move this process forward. So again, I apologize. I did not look at those questions in a timely manner.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Hello, everyone.
Hello, good evening.
Good evening. I see three candidates before us, Ms. Copeland, Ms. Baldwin, and Dr. Ruth. Are there other candidates?
Those are the only three candidates for mayor. How are you, Michael?
Thank you. I'm doing well and hope everyone is doing well.
Thank you.
We will ask a series of questions. We will alternate those questions. However, we will begin by allowing you to provide a minute and a half to introduce yourselves. At this time, we will ask our current mayor, Marion Baldwin, to begin the process with her opening statement.
Hey, just making sure I'm not muted. All right, thank you. Well, first off, I want to say why I'm running. And I feel it's really important for us to have continuity in leadership. We started a lot of work on issues of housing affordability and choice, expanded transit. We've made some real headway there with BRT. We are initiating a reduction in gun violence through a gun buyback program, education program, and also through mental health services that we're providing through our Acorns unit. And we also have done a lot of things with an equity lens. We created a new Office of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, as well as a new Office of Community Engagement. And they are all working together to make sure that we are inclusive, an inclusive community. I also have been very supportive and led efforts to provide small business support, especially during the pandemic. And as you all know, we have a parks bond coming up, which I believe will allow us to have parks and open space for all residents of our city. So, you know, one of the other things I want to acknowledge is that Raleigh is growing by leaps and bounds, whether we like it or not. And my goal is to ensure that our city remains a great place to live. We have a great quality of life, which is why people are moving here in droves. And all of the priorities I just listed above are the things that I am committed to continue working on and leading as mayor.
Thank you. Ms. Copeland.
Hi,
Your
good
opening statement, please. I'm sorry.
Oh, no problem. Hi, good evening. I'm DeQuanta Copeland, and I'm running for mayor because I fight with the people, but I fight for the people. But more importantly, I am one of the people. And because of what we have seen in Raleigh in the recent years, the gentrification, the welcoming the newcomers, but pushing out the natives. Those of us who are in Raleigh can no longer, or most of us, I'm not going to say everybody, can't afford to live in Raleigh. We're pushing people out, but yet they're having to commute back into Raleigh to maintain jobs and to be able to provide supportive services for our families, to have inclusive communication, reopen the doors, actually provide the help that people need, not what we want them to need. And fighting for affordable housing. Housing, the density of housing that is going up right now, it looks good. However, who is it affordable for? It's not affordable for the people who are here. Most of the people that are in Raleigh that is crying for affordable housing is 60% below AMI. And yet we have homes going up in apartments or townhouses going up at $300,000. Who is that affordable for? So fighting for true affordable housing, working across the board to unify our people and our businesses, and being able to provide education on how to obtain and sustain affordable housing. There was a time when a lot of public housing was taken and people was promised our first dibs on getting into those areas. When they came back, that wasn't true, because those same people that was displaced was never educated on how to be able to get into those housing. So providing programs, mentoring programs. Our youth are suffering, our youth are hurting, and they're facing some very, very bad days right now. And as a city, we can curb that, we can change that. Violence in our neighborhoods and in our streets have risen. And we as a city, we have the ability to change that. So that's why I'm running for mayor of Raleigh.
Thank you, Ms. Copeland. Dr. Ruth?
Hello, everyone. My name is Terrence Ruth, and I'm running for mayor of Raleigh. I'm a father, a husband, professor, a student of the community. I believe that those fundamentally who are closest to the problem are also closest to the solution. And therefore, I'm prioritizing the voices, concerns, and hopes of Raleigh residents. What I have heard from residents is a desire to see leadership over politics. And I plan to do that by leading on issues of affordability, community activation, and small business support. Now, we saw a pandemic that ravaged the underinvested sections of our city, and we're still seeing the impact of COVID on our small businesses and neighborhoods. And we are witnessing a wave of evictions and job loss. So unfortunately, not in 2020 and not right now are we hearing residents have trust in leadership. And so we have a deficit of housing and we have a deficit of trust across the city. But I believe we can build a better future for all with new leadership, my leadership, a leadership that truly leads and includes community, and that is willing to continue to earn your trust, that is fueled by love for the city and everyone it encompasses. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll ask the first question. Many residents would suggest that there's economic disparity in the development in the city of Raleigh. Would you agree with that statement? And if so, why or why not? And also, can you offer any opinion relative to development for all of Raleigh? And we will start with Dr. Ruth.
Yeah, no, thank you for the question, Michael. What we're seeing in terms of disparity is an increase in affordability. The more affordable Raleigh housing stock get, the more challenging it will be to fix it. You rarely see cities reverse course on affordability, especially if the housing development is privately funded. So we are talking about research now that shows that a surging supply of new homes causes prices to fall. And then developers and investors traditionally will wait for prices to recover before building more homes. So it should be understood that we need to build more housing in order to remain affordable and reduce that disparity. But furthermore, having enough housing results in stabilized pricing, preventing deepening affordability crisis. But building more must be complemented by effectively executed policies that work to create housing for everyone, especially, and this is the key for us in Raleigh, especially for those most in need. So we need deed-restricted units. We need to protect existing tenants. We need to be creative around raising additional public funds beyond the affordable housing bond. And we need to be aggressive on land acquisition and community benefit agreements and REITs. And we also need to secure multifamily acquisitions and preservation. And we need rental assistance in an aggressive way. What we're seeing now in the units that are coming across Raleigh are at a cost that's unaffordable for most residents who have enjoyed Raleigh for many years. And so we're seeing eviction meetings where people are pleading to stay in their homes. That disparity is growing, and it's growing according to an AMI that's forever changing and shifting. It once was 30% below. Now we're talking about your firefighters, your police officers, your teachers trying to afford to stay in Raleigh. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you. Ms. Copeland, again, many Raleigh residents suggested there's economic disparity throughout the city. Would you agree with that statement? And if so, why or why not? And any other comments that you'd like to share regarding the issue?
Yes, sir, Michael. Thank you for that question. I absolutely agree with that. And I actually feel as though the current leadership in council has encouraged that disparity and that gap that it exists. So for many people living in Raleigh who's been here, the cost of living has increased by double-digit numbers within months, and especially in the last couple of years. But the housing affordability has become almost impossible. And truly, it doesn't matter your income level, because right now we see people with money who is fighting for housing. We see people who have the income to afford housing not be able to obtain housing. So to further encourage the disparities of those who have already been struggling, I'm accustomed to working with the county. So right now, focusing in on Raleigh is just fine tuning that pick. Now, with the people who, with us having housing, and yet the jobs are not paying the amount of money, and yet we can work with the General Assembly. We can help put things in place to cap how much a house is going for, especially when our people is not earning the income to be able to sustain their housing. And while our families are being forced out, we have to look at ourselves as leadership and not just build for the future, but take care of us that are struggling today.
Thank you. Ms. Baldwin, again, many residents suggest that there's economic disparity in the city of Raleigh. Would you agree with that statement? Yes or no? And add any other comments that you'd like to provide regarding the issue.
Yes, Michael, I do agree with that, which is why we have worked so hard the past 2.5 years on the housing issue. So, you know, I'd like to go back a little history here. You know, we had a recession 2008, 9, 10, 11 that was devastating to our housing and home building community. Builders went bankrupt. They did not build houses. And that has created, not only in Raleigh, but nationally, a supply and demand issue. There's a demand and the supply cannot meet this. So the way to address this is really by building more housing. And we have to look at density. Density equals affordability. So I just want to talk a little bit about some of the things we have done as a council to address this. When I was on the city council previously, I was the one member with Corey Branch who came out in favor of a 1-cent property tax dedicated to affordable housing. That has brought in approximately $7 million a year and helped us provide gap funding for affordable housing. This council also helped pass an $80 million housing bond with 73% voter approval. We have allowed for the construction of accessory dwelling units, which is a much more affordable apartment type of situation or rental situation. We have eliminated exclusionary zoning. This was zoning that prevented missing middle housing, townhomes, duplexes. We can now build these in more areas of our city. We approved a text change to allow for the construction of cottage courts. Those are smaller homes on bigger lots with shared yard space, very effective and affordable way to live, and also tiny homes. We eliminated parking minimums because those parking requirements add to the cost of housing. We're upzoning for density and transit corridors. We partnered with 2 nonprofits to construct affordable housing on city-owned land. We issued an RFP to build mixed income housing next to Moore Square. And we just cut the ribbon on our new partnership with Campbell Law School, where we're providing services for eviction prevention. Our goal is to build 57 affordable units by 2024. We're currently at 3,910. So we still have a way to go to achieve our goal, but we are off to a good start. And
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I am going to take the liberty of asking a question from the chat. And that question is, do you support rent control? And we will start with Dr. Ruth. And you're muted.
Thank you for the question, Michael. I think Raleigh really need to explore and create people-centered pro-housing policies, which would be related to your question. And we want to target development where it would benefit the most people. And at the same time, I think that the city must be cautious of development when it may do the most harm, such as in areas where there's lower income communities and communities of color.
Ms. Copeland, do you support rent control?
Yes, sir. I absolutely support rent control and control ourselves. However, that is the state and federal level that we will have to sit at the table to get a cap on rent control, so that our homeowners or property owners that is providing housing has a cap on a percentage in which they can increase rent for those who are there. By allowing property owners to continuously increase the cost of housing while the livable wage is not yet meeting that increase, then we're so I would definitely sit at the table and advocate for us to give an incentive. We can give an incentive on the back end to the property owners, be it taxes or however, so that the families, the property owners will be able to continue to facilitate and stay with the values of their properties, but the families will not be the one to eat the cost of that increasing housing around. And as mayor, I will absolutely fight for rent control in Raleigh. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Baldwin, do you support rent control?
Whether I support it or not, it is not legal in North Carolina. It's a state issue. Everybody always talks about 2 things. The other being inclusionary zoning. That is also something that is not legal here. That is why we put so much effort into working with our partners to build housing that is affordable, where we have to do things that are legal.
Thank you. I will ask Richard Moore to provide the next question to the panel.
Okay, my question is this: we've had a lot of discussion on housing and affordable housing and so forth, but I also want to ask, what other significant issues and challenges are, in your view, are facing the city of Raleigh? And if elected, how do you plan to approach getting to the resolution of those issues and challenges?
Ms. Copeland?
I do apologize. When he first started asking a question, he was very blurry in my ear. Can you repeat that question, please?
Yeah, sure. We've had a lot of discussion on housing and affordability and so forth. It's one of the key issues, and rightly so. But my question is, what are some other significant issues and challenges that are facing the city of Raleigh? And what, if elected, how do you plan to approach getting to the resolution of these issues and challenges?
Well, one of the major issues that we're facing is inclusive communication with the people. Being able to open the doors out. The current leadership and council has absolutely closed the doors, and they, from what I've seen, they have done everything in their power to censor the people, what they can say, how long they have to say it. So opening that door back, so because everybody, nowhere, whether you live in North Raleigh, South Raleigh, East Raleigh, or West Raleigh, our issues are not the same with what we see and what we face. However, we all want humility, and being able to include the people of Raleigh back into the conversation so that we can effectively help. Another thing for me would be prioritizing road projects. The city is continuously getting cosmetic facelifts to welcome newcomers, but we still have intersections that are deadly that doesn't have a traffic light in our city. We still have roads that people are cracking rims and busting tires, but yet we keep widening roads or making infrastructures accessible for cosmetic. We have to prioritize where we're putting our funding, and we have to focus on what our issues are currently. I'm all for looking in the future and building for the future, but if we cannot coexist and if we cannot sustainably exist right now in Raleigh, all that you're doing for the future, it's not going to be worth it. It's not fair to the people to continuously get put out. So I ask that we as a people come together like never before. And while we're prioritizing our roads, infrastructures, and the funding, then, and with communication, then I absolutely want to focus on our youth.
Thank you, Ms. Copeland.
Thank you.
Ms. Baldwin.
Yes, so tied to housing is transit. And that is a top priority because they all need to work together. So one of the things that I will be working on is continued enhancements to our transit system. We have fare free service right now, and I'm committed to ensuring that that continues. Bus rapid transit will be kicking off on New Bern Avenue. We start construction next year. So I'll be continuing to work with the FTA and others to ensure that our projects that are transit oriented, are working and getting the attention they need, and that we're getting the funding we need. And that's also priority, working with our elected leaders, because they can help us in that regard. So transit to me is one of the top priorities, followed by commuter rail. So we have the ability to move regionally. So we're not like Austin, Texas, where when you fly into the airport, you're sitting in traffic for 2 hours to get to where you want to go. We cannot have that happen in our region. The second thing is gun violence. We have seen an uptick in gun violence, and we do have a plan. We have just done our first gun buyback program, which was very successful, had 150 people show up to turn in unwanted weapons. We are also working with the state's public safety office to come up with an education program on safe storage. So we keep guns out of people's hands that shouldn't have them. And finally, our chief is working on a program that is very data-driven, that where we can identify areas where gun violence will occur, who may be involved, and get people mental health services. We have a social worker program now with Acorns, and they are following up with a number of people to help get them what they need. And then the other things, I think that is two other things really important.
I'm sorry. we'll have to move to the next candidate. Dr. Ruth.
How you doing, Michael? Thank you again for the question. For me, if I just pay attention to the host of the platform today, RWCA, there's a rich history around local politics and local engagement. The history of RWCA rests on a very active, engaged community that was organized to make sure that the voices of the community and the voice of the unheard are amplified. And I think that that has been an Achilles heel of the city since 2019. And so I think a top priority, if we're going to deal with any other policy issue, is we gotta address the crisis of trust. And we do that through prioritizing how we engage people. Currently, the engagement is meeting-based. You have to attend a meeting, you have a certain length of time, but the more dynamic and celebrating awarded cities have a dynamic engagement strategy for their residents. One that's decentralized, embedded in the communities, one that allows for the city staff to both be placed in work in local regional offices so they can be embedded in the regions that they are designing for. We know that community engagement is linked to all other policy issues. The research say that a person engaged in their local municipality based on their relationship to property. Their relationship to property. So we can't talk about engagement if we're not talking about home ownership. And we're not talking about temporary housing, we're talking about permanent housing. So the level of engagement reaches through almost every significant issue in our city. And so for me, that is the number one issue that I start with. And the number one thing that I will do entering the office is take a listening tour, a tour that allows for me to hear the voices, capture those voices, and then make sure that the policy that's implemented is reflective of those voices that are screaming to touch their city again.
Thank you. You're on mute, Michael.
Ms. Copeland, Ms. Baldwin, and Dr. Ruth, thank you so much for taking time to be with us on this evening. We appreciate all that you have shared, and we will follow up, and I should say the PAC, in the forthcoming days. So again, thank you and have a great evening.
Michael, is there a way, if we wanted to send you some information, can we email that to you? Because I did not get to speak about community engagement, and I'd like to make sure that you're knowledgeable about all the things that we're doing.
Certainly, I will ask our moderator to put an email address in the chat, and any additional information that you'd like to provide, you can forward to that email address.
Okay, thank you so much.
Certainly. Thank you, everyone. Our next race will be the Raleigh City Council. If our moderator will let those individuals in at this time. We have Stormy Ford and Franklin, and are there other candidates for Raleigh City Council?
I am Josh Bradley at large.
Portia Rochelle.
I see 4 candidates for Raleigh City Council. Are there others joining us?
Hey, Jonathan Melton is here. Megan Patton, District B.
Wanda Hunter, District C.
Kat Lawson, District A.
Christina Jones, District E.
Currently, I have,
District C.
to clarify, I have Corey, Christina, Kat, Wanda, Megan, Stephen, Ann, Joshua, Portia, and Johnny. Do I have that accurate?
Todd
Or is
Kennedy
it
with District D,
Jonathan?
too.
Jonathan. And Todd.
Yes.
Jane Harrison here for District D.
And Jane. Have I missed anyone?
Minu Lee, District B.
Jeremiah Pierce said he's not been promoted, so he can't speak.
Jennifer Truman, candidate for District D.
Okay. And did we get Jeremiah promoted?
Yeah, Zaina Baloch is in District B and is in the attendees pool.
I'm sorry, could you repeat his name again?
Her name, Zaina Baloch, starts with a Z.
Okay,
Hey, Zaina Baloch, District B.
thank you. We will provide a opportunity for you to provide a 1-minute opening statement. Following that, we will ask questions to each of you. You will have a minute to respond to each of those questions as well. And so at this time, and I'm going to try to do this based upon who I see on the screen. And so please bear with me. If I overlook someone, I will do my best to get back with you and pray that the screen does not change. We will start with Ms. Fort.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you to the RWCA for hosting this forum and inviting us to participate. My name is Stormy Fort. I currently serve on the Raleigh City Council. I'm in District D. I will be running at large and being on the ballot in an at-large slot in November. I'm running for the City Council. I do think we've started some really great work within the city, but we've got a lot of work to do. My platform is running on making sure we can increase our affordable housing stock, working on increasing and making our transportation system much more efficient, working to make sure that our infrastructure can keep up with the demands of a growing city, and also working with various entities to promote small minority-owned businesses. So again, thank you for the opportunity to speak, and I won't take up a lot of time since you've got so many people to talk to.
Thank you. Joshua.
Hey everybody, thank y'all so much for inviting us to into the forum. I really appreciate that. My name is Josh Bradley. I'm running for Raleigh City Council at large. I'm running to make sure that people that work in the city can afford to stay in the city. Affordable housing, and when I say affordable housing, I shouldn't say that. I should say low-cost housing, because if your housing costs more than 33% of your income, then you're considered housing burdened. Over 50%, you're really housing burdened, which is the federal goal. And most of the development that's coming in is for luxury and market rate housing. When it comes down to it, I just think that we need somebody there that actually isn't wealthy and understands what it's like not to be so, to make sure that workers actually live in the city. Also concerned about restructuring policing to where it's protecting property and doesn't murder people without consequence. I'm here to make sure that environmentally we stay on. I'll let you go. Sorry. Thanks.
Thank you. Jennifer.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Truman. I'm running for District D, which is the southwest corner of Raleigh. I've lived in District D for 15 years. I'm a neighbor. I'm a designer trained in engineering and architecture, a working class, working mom, a small business owner, and a community advocate. I believe that Raleigh's at a critical moment we can continue to grow. And I'm optimistic that we can do that by welcoming new neighbors and supporting existing residents, because we can grow equitably and sustainably if we focus on it. We can also focus on a budget that really reflects our people and our values, and also provides the housing and transit choices that people need so they can walk, bus, or bike where they want to go.
Thank you. And I do want to be respectful. I'm having some challenges with some of these names. And can you help me? Zainab.
Zainab, say nub, nub, like knob, but nub.
Zainab.
Zainab, the B is not silent.
Okay. Thank you. Your 1 minute for your opening statement, please, Zainab.
Okay. Thanks. Hi, y'all. My name is Zainab Baloch, and I'm running for Raleigh City Council District B. In 2019, I ran for mayor, and I campaigned alongside this current council who campaigned on promises of affordable housing in a more equitable and sustainable city. But since then, Raleigh's only gotten worse. More people can't afford basic necessities. The corruption is rampant among wealthy developers, and the community environment are being literally sacrificed to fatten the pockets of old money. And, this is how Raleigh politics has run for a while. And I think this year we really have an opportunity to be able to, turn over the direction of our city back to the people. And so I'm excited to be here, and thank you for having us.
Thank you. Ann. And your 1 minute opening statement, please.
And could you unmute?
I'm sorry, I think I'm unmuted now. Yes? Are
Yes.
you? Okay, thank you. Good to be here. I'm running because I'm very concerned about the integrity of our council right now. I have served before 3 terms at large. I think local government is where you make really good things happen. And I think our current council has lost track of the fact that solutions to our problems, and we've got a bunch of them, come best from the people who live here. We've got lots of resources and talent, and we need to put that to work. I've been encouraged by people who are coming forward to help. There will be at least 3 new people on our council, and because I've had experience in the community that's pretty deep, I think I can help us get things done. And I look forward to that. Raleigh's a great place. We want to continue the challenging work. But some of the things that are in the way are, I think, misstatements. Density does not necessarily equal affordability. You have to have a goal for affordability, and you have to pursue it at every turn. And I believe the current council has missed a number of those opportunities, some of which are still, right, sitting on their plate. So I'm glad to be with you all. I look forward to serving with whomever is elected and engaging our community again in ways that are really potent and can provide some stability of.
Thank you, Ann.
Thank you.
Jonathan.
Good evening, everyone. Jonathan Melton, happy to be here and see all of you again. I am one of the current at-large city council members. I ran in 2019 as a first-time candidate. I was sworn in soon after, and then the world changed. It's been a very difficult term, quite challenging at times. Despite that fact, and despite having to govern through global and systemic challenges, I am proud of some of the work we've accomplished in zoning reform, housing affordability, investments in transit, and things like implementing a police advisory board, seeking oversight power, passing a non-discrimination ordinance. We've done a lot of work. There's still a lot of work to do. And I stepped forward in 2019, raised my hand to serve. I feel like I have more to give to the city, and I'm hoping to be reelected. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Catherine.
All right, thank you all so much for having us here tonight. So I am Kat Lawson. I am running for Raleigh City Council in District A. So that's North Raleigh, 540 to 440, roughly Capitol Boulevard to Creedmoor. Now we've added in the Lynn Lake on the other side of the border. So I am running to make sure that as Raleigh continues to grow, that we grow in a way that still allows everybody who currently calls it home to continue calling it home and to make room for all the folks who want to make their future home here in Raleigh. For me, that means focusing on both affordable development, both in the sense of subsidized and low income development, making sure that we have the most vulnerable members of our community protected, and also making sure that we have a variety of options for entry-level housing, entry-level homes that folks who work for the city, who are essential workers, who are new to the world of homeownership are able to get that entry into, making a physical home their own within Raleigh. So I'm excited to be working on these issues. I am a lawyer and a problem solver by nature, and I look forward to having this conversation with you all this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Portia?
Good evening. Thank you all for this opportunity to speak. I am running for City Council at large. I ran in 2019. I came in 4th place. I have been encouraged to run again, and I'm excited to run again. My platform deals with some of the same issues as those that have spoken. We have a housing crisis, and I'd like to work together with the community and the developers to develop a plan where everyone can find a decent and safe place to live. We have too many people that are still living in the woods, too many people that are being threatened to be evicted, and they have nowhere to go. I'm also concerned about the taxes of houses where people have lived for years, and now they're subject to lose their houses because of development in the community, and their tax rates have gone up. I'm concerned also about equity in pay. If they don't make a decent salary, it's really hard to pay rent or to purchase a home for those that desire. I'm also concerned about the rezoning issues that affect low-income people. And I'm also concerned about community engagement. I think we need to work on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Corey?
Thank you for the time. Thank you, everyone that's running for office and stepping forward. I'm running for re-election to represent District C, the district that is probably the most diverse district of all the districts here in Raleigh. We have a housing problem. We have a housing challenge. A lot of that is tied to economics. My goal is for us to continue to focus and work on economic opportunities so that people can afford to live where they choose to live and where they want to live. Making sure that our young people have opportunities to grow in a safe environment. We have multiple community centers. I have 13 community centers alone in District C. Putting in programming so that these centers are vital to uplift and support. It also gives parents a chance to know where their kids are so that they're safe and that they know they will be coming home at the end of the day. And also we have to look again, housing opportunities, housing availability for all across multiple price points, but especially those on our low income, which means increasing our work with the Raleigh Housing Authority and other agencies that support housing.
Thank you. Jane?
Hi there. Good evening, everyone. Thanks for having me. My name is Jane Harrison, and I'm running for Raleigh City Council because I love where we live. I'm an experienced economic and community development leader, and I'm a tireless advocate for my neighbors. With a career in public service, I know that better decisions are made when everyone is at the table. And as Raleigh grows, I want to ensure people are not left behind. Community-led development, affordable housing, and environmental stewardship are my priorities. I'm a proponent of economic growth that benefits all of Raleigh's residents. I have a progressive vision and will push for thoughtful, common sense solutions across the city. As an environmental economist and scientist at NC State University, I help communities across the state safeguard our natural resources and make smart long-term investments in infrastructure. We can plan for a sustainable and inclusive future for generations to come. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Lee?
Good evening. Thank you for having me here. Well, my name is Manu Lee. I'm running for Raleigh City Council District B. I'm a first-generation Korean-American college student. I'm a commissioner for the Raleigh Civil Service Commission, a guardian ad litem, a substitute teacher for the Wake County Public School System,
And I'm running because representation matters. As a young Asian American, I can bring a voice to the decision-making processes that has never been seen before. As a young college student, I can provide a voice for the future homeowners and renters of tomorrow. And that's exactly why I'm running today.
Thank you. Frank?
Hey guys, here, Dr. Frank Fields, running for Raleigh City Council District C. I'm born and raised here in Raleigh District C. My parents are born and raised in Raleigh District C. So this is something that's very near and dear to my heart. I'm running because over the past years, I don't like the direction that we've been going in my district and in Raleigh. So if not me, then who? If not now, then when? I've worked in the community college system for the last 10 years. I'm a small business owner here. I'm on the board of directors for the YMCA here. So what I want to do is just bring back the community. We've lost our community, I feel, a little bit. And I know that we've had a lot of progress. I know that we've had a lot of things that happen good in the city so far, but we cannot lose the essence of what Raleigh or what District C is. So I'm here to make sure that we don't do that.
Thank you. Mary?
Good evening, everyone. My name is Mary Black. I'm running for Raleigh City Council in District A. My direct background is in environmental and climate advocacy, and that is kind of the guiding principles that are leading me to run this campaign. I'm running because I believe that we should have a city where everybody has the opportunity to thrive. I've lived in Raleigh for most of my life, and I've seen it take shape and develop in ways that aren't necessarily sustainable for not only just the planet, but the people who have lived here. My mom is a public school teacher, and I've seen how us living in this area, she's not able to afford to buy a house, and things are just becoming increasingly unaffordable, and we're losing all sense of community engagement. So I'm here representing the values of people who are activists, organizers on the ground, who are collectively building a vision where we can all thrive and be together and really be in right relationships to develop a city that is sustainable and works for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Wanda?
Good evening, and thank you all for hosting this forum. My name is Wanda Hunter, and I'm running for Raleigh City Council District C, which is Southeast Raleigh. And I am a mother, a homeowner, and a community advocate, and also a servant of the community. And I'm running on a platform of justice, a justice across 4 pillars, which are housing, community engagement, economic, and transit. And across those pillars, we've seen the issues that we have with housing, as everybody has talked about already, community engagement, the disbanding of our CACs, and also the economics of our city workers not being able to work and live here in the city, and also with transit that is also tearing down our naturally occurring affordable housing. So these are the reasons why I'm running for this platform. And I also want to foster love and hope back into the city. Love with leadership, opportunity, values, and engagement, and hope with housing, outreach, perseverance, and equity in our city.
Thank you. And have I missed anyone?
Yes, Michael, Todd Kennedy.
I'm sorry, Todd, go ahead.
All right. Hello, Michael. Good to see you again, and good evening, everyone. I'm Todd Kennedy, running for the District DC, and thank you to the RWCA. Raleigh is a wonderful city. I've had the good fortune to live here for more than 25 years, and I'm a native of the region. I've built a career here in public infrastructure, a family, and I'm dedicated to the community. That dedication has been demonstrated by more than 20 years of service and leadership here in the city through the Democratic Party, community organizations, including 2 dedicated to affordable housing, and city boards and commissions, such as a chair of the Human Relations Commission. This is a track record of leadership that has been validated by key endorsements from former and current elected officials that I've had the honor to work with, including 2 former mayors and former councilor Eugene Weeks. We are coming out of a difficult period in our history. We're now facing unprecedented growth pressure. I want to serve on council to help shape our city's response to that. I want a future embodied by shared prosperity, inclusiveness, and resilience. This campaign is built on ideas to make that future a reality. It's built on a long track record of experience, and it's built on a style that seeks common ground and elevated tone, and above all, results for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you. And Christina.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Christina Jones, and I am running for Raleigh City Council District E. I am a mother, I'm a substitute teacher, and a strong community advocate. I'm the current and longest serving chairperson for the Raleigh Citizens Advisory Council, which was disbanded by this council back in 2020. We've waited for 2 years, and there has not been an adequate replacement that is putting the citizens' voice at the front of the conversation. I want to fix that. I want to bring that to topics of affordable housing, of environmental justice, of transit, because without the community's voice, we can't govern. We are here to represent the people who elect us, and I want to be that person for you because I don't think this council is. Thank you.
Thank you. And Megan, did I miss you?
Yes,
I do apologize.
that's all right. It looks like there's a couple other people too. Hi, everyone. My name is Megan Patton. I'm running for Raleigh City Council District B. I moved to Raleigh about 6 years ago, right before the birth of my daughter. I moved here because I knew that Raleigh was the place where we could offer her a bright, vibrant, thriving community with libraries, parks, family, community engagement, and all of those things. And in many ways, Raleigh has provided, but it hasn't provided for everybody. And I really want to make sure that this is a city that works for everyone. I think I have a shared story with the residents of Raleigh. You know, when we moved here, I didn't have any healthcare, and I went back to work at 6 weeks postpartum. I waited tables. I was a nanny. I was a preschool teacher. I worked nights at a factory. I am one of the voices who couldn't always get down to City Hall at 7 p.m. because I didn't have childcare and I had to work. And I think there's a lot of opportunity for Raleigh to be the leader in activating all of the voices and all of the types of people who need to be at the table. My platform priorities are affordable housing, as so many have said. You know, I live in a community where I couldn't move back into it, and neither could the teachers or nurses or firefighters who live near me now. I'm also running on a platform of sustainability because I want to make sure that this beautiful city we have, oh, sorry, I'll cut it short. I just want to make sure that we preserve this city for my daughter and the next 7 generations of people to come. Thank you.
Thank you. And is there anyone else that has not had an opportunity?
Michael, I haven't spoken yet.
And I'm sorry, I don't see you. So if you will say your name, please.
Frank Pierce.
Frank, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
So my name is Frank Pierce. I'm running for Raleigh City Council District B. I have lived in Raleigh my entire life. I've watched it change over the years, seen the good and the bad. One of the things that hasn't been said so far is that how everyone plans to get these things done. We need leaders who know how to write grants. We need leaders who know how to bring policy forward. We need to be meeting down with the people at General Assembly so that we can bring more money to our city, so that we can have affordable housing, we can have better parks, we can have better schools, we can have all the things that we cherish in the city, but we need to make sure that we have leaders who know how to bring those things forward, leaders who understand where the money can come from. We aren't taxing people out of their houses. We're making sure that we bring everyone forward to the table. Someone who's actually worked in the community for years. District B used to be a fully minority district. Raleigh was one of 20 cities that had a 50% or more minority in 2 sections. District B has now changed to where that is only 46%. That is a huge swing in difference, and we are taking voices and silencing them. We need to make sure that we have leaders who have been in the community for years and not just showing up to run at election time, but people who are there to help kids and communities throughout all the troubles we've had. I'm Frank Pierce, running for Raleigh City Council District B.
Thank you. And I think that is everyone. Because of the number of participants we have, we will ask that you provide quick responses as much as in detail as possible within the minute that you're given. If you are going over the minute, I will raise my finger to remind you that you have 10 additional seconds. So again, because of the number of candidates that we have before us, we will ask that you provide succinct answers as best you can and to be as detailed as you can. Our first question will come from Richard Moore.
Okay, this is kind of a combination question here. I'll make it simple, part yes and no. Do you support bringing, we've heard a lot of discussion about community engagement. Do you support bringing back the CACs to give the community greater participation and ownership in the decision-making process? Answer yes or no. And if the answer is no, how do you propose to, or what do you suggest to improve community engagement in terms of alternatives?
Thank you. We will start with Frank.
Frank Fields or Frank Pierce?
Frank Pierce.
Yes, I plan on bringing back CACs, but I plan on expanding on them. I'm going to offer them at different hours so that people who cannot show up to the meetings because of what time they are, like at 7 o'clock at night, they have different times. We can offer some during the day, some at night, different days of the month, so that people have the opportunity to show up and have their voice heard. I also plan on, while as an elected official, having one meeting every month in each of my communities. I have 19 precincts. I plan on having one meeting in each precinct every month so that I can get out there, discuss, and learn from our community what they need and what our community needs as a whole.
Thank you. Christina?
As the chair of the CAC currently, I wholeheartedly support reinstating CACs. There are many solutions as to how we can make them better. And I think it starts with the city council being open to using the communications department and advertising them better than they did during their tenure of 45 years prior to their disbandment.
Thank you. Todd?
Excuse me. Yes, I think the CAC system needed improvement, and that's something I think a lot of people agreed upon. Unfortunately, the council, the way they made its decision to end CACs created more discord and hurt that was necessary. I would potentially support a CAC 2.0 that addresses the shortcomings of the previous system.
Thank you. Wanda?
Yes, I support reinstating the CACs.
Mary?
Absolutely. I support reinstating the CACs. I think it's imperative for us to be focusing on community engagement. As a veteran of a city board, I think they operate in silos oftentimes and don't necessarily represent the collective voices of the community. So I think it's important to also do it in a way that's representing the deep gentrification that's happening in ways that reach marginalized and voices that don't always have the capacity to make it to particular meeting times on particular days. So maybe hybrid, different times, things of that sort.
Mary? Mary, are you with us?
You just called Mary. I think we have, I'm sorry, next case.
Frank Fields?
I absolutely wholeheartedly support the reinstatement of CACs. We have to remember, when we're on the council, we are civil servants. So how we cannot be civil servants without dealing with the community and hearing their voices and doing what we need to do intentionally to hear what they want to, what they need and what they want. So absolutely.
Thank you. Mr. Lee?
I would support the reinstallment of a improved CAC system as it stood before. CACs only benefited those with the time, money, and inclination to attend these meetings. So we need to do better in terms of citizen engagement, and we just need to find other routes of engaging our communities, especially our minority communities, into decision-making processes.
Thank you. Jane?
Yes, I would support bringing back CACs. They didn't require money to attend. I do believe that economic development should be community-centered, and city decisions have to recognize those that are most affected, including historically marginalized communities, as well as those that are adjacent to a development. When the CACs were disbanded by this current council, that caused the hair on the back of my neck to raise. I wanted to know why we don't want neighbors getting together anymore. Why I shouldn't know what the plans are for Avon Ferry Road, where the bike lanes are going to go. I decided to reestablish the West Raleigh CAC. That group, it fell apart when city support was taken away. And there are many CACs that still are working together. But then we have this unequal, inequitable landscape of community groups that are operating across the city. So some groups kept going, some groups didn't. We have to have a structure that facilitates everyone to be able to come to those meetings. and have that opportunity for community input. Thanks.
Thank you. Corey.
So I voted to keep CACs at the time, but that was not what prevailed. I attended the majority of my CAC meetings. I had multiple CACs that overlap multiple districts. So I would work to bring something CAC-like back to allow citizens a chance to hear about Parks and Rec, hear about transportation, hear about stormwater, hear about what development and things are occurring in their community. So that's what I will focus on in my next term.
Thank you. Portia.
Yes, I definitely support bringing back the CAC. I've lived in Raleigh for over 45 years, and I learned a lot by attending the CACs. Number one, we had developers there where we could ask questions. They would go back and work on things and come back to us. That was very helpful, especially with rezoning. And we also had the opportunity to engage with our police department and our city council representative to keep us updated on certain issues. Most definitely, community engagement is necessary. Thank you.
Thank you. Megan.
Yes, I would also support the reinstatement of CACs. I think with some modifications, there are 28 community centers in Raleigh. I think bringing the CAC level down to groups that are centered around their community center will allow them to be more responsive to the community for timing, hybrid models, et cetera. So I think CACs are a really important part of community engagement. Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Catherine.
So the CACs as they existed had really failed to evolve, and they did not on average represent the most disempowered members of the community. They were representing kind of entrenched residents who had been there for a very long time. So I don't support bringing them back as they previously existed. And I would focus instead on 3 different things. One, we have the newly appointed Board of Community Engagement. It's just got started. I think we need to give it a chance to succeed and figure out how to improve it before we decide we're going to go back to a model that we already know had failed. Secondly, Taisha Hinton, the director of the Community Engagement Office, is fantastic. She has ideas to create under the recently approved budget, a bus that will visit different members of our community, that will bring council and the discussions to the different places, meet people where they're at. I want to continue supporting her and her efforts to do that affirmative outreach. And then finally, I think we can do a better job at publicizing and bringing in folks to neighborhood hearings, which are already required to be held for zoning approvals. And so making sure that those are representative, I think will go a long way to address concerns about specific developments in specific communities.
Thank you. Jonathan.
Thanks. No, but I don't really think this is a yes/no question. I want to play by the rules. Groups called CAC still exist. They still meet. I meet with them. But the city maintains a neighborhood registry program where any group, a CAC, a garden club, an apartment association can register, get access to staff resources, get access to community centers for free to hold their meetings. So that system still exists. And I think we can do a better job of publicizing that opportunity. In-person neighborhood meetings are an important piece of the puzzle, but they cannot be the entire puzzle. A lot of folks did not know what a CAC was and did not attend CAC meetings, so that cannot be the only city-sanctioned form of engagement in our city. We have to decentralize. We have to be meeting people where they are. And so I think we can do that in a multitude of ways. So I would not bring it back in the way it was, but I do want to remind folks that the access to the community resources, community centers, and staff still exists. And there is a website where you can register your neighborhood association.
Anne.
Thanks. I'm hearing a consensus that CACs under any circumstance need to be dramatically refreshed. That includes virtual meetings and in-person meetings. And they can be small and they can be large. We've all expanded our ability to deal electronically. But how we meet together can be expanded in a lot of different ways. And I'm encouraged by the willingness for people to get out and see people and help people get together. We've got a lot of new people in Raleigh, and they maybe need some help in getting connected and oriented. So I'm glad to help with that. Councilor, no.
Thank you. Zainab.
Zainab.
Zainab. I apologize. If I say it enough, I'll get it. Say it one more time.
Zainab.
Okay.
Yeah. Do I support reinstating the only community engagement process the city had? Yes, it's actually crazy because Raleigh is the only city this size in the whole nation without a formal community engagement process. And, you know, when council eliminated it, they not only eliminated the program, it was a historic, unprecedented program put into place by the only Black mayor in Raleigh's history, Clarence Leitner. And so while the CACs were not representative of everyone, they were a collective group of people that kept the development in check. And currently, by getting rid of them, the development is what we're seeing right now is completely gone unchecked. So I think it's important to think of CACs as one form of engagement to bring them back, but it's only one form. We need to figure out other multiple ways that allows people to engage and hold decision-making powers over how the city uses our taxpayer dollars.
Thank you, Zainab. I'm getting there.
Got it.
Jennifer.
Thank you. This is definitely not a yes or no question. I served as a secretary for the Southwest CAC for years, taking notes on the many things that were said. And because of that, I know that CACs were not perfect. The system did not reach everyone in Raleigh, and very few people knew that they could engage that way. And the ability that the city has had to redirect those resources since getting rid of CACs to things like the Community Engagement Board, to things like online resources supporting all neighborhood groups have been really beneficial. And I think a lot of what people miss, we lost also because we've been living in a virtual world because of the pandemic. Now that we see people getting out in campaign season and out and about in neighborhood groups, we know that there are other ways we can get together. That said, I would reinstate the DNA meetings once a month. And on the campaign trail, I started and I would continue if elected Friday morning coffee chats, coffee shops and parks around town. So you can check my website for that schedule. I'd love to talk to people directly now and after being elected. I think the counselors are the ones that should be able to be out there and talking to the people about what they need directly.
Thank you. Joshua.
I would definitely support reinstating CACs. Yeah, they didn't need a lot of work, but they needed time, advertising, and resources. And apparently we have enough money to spend a whole lot of money on a bus to one-on-one people, which I think is neat. But if we've got that, we surely have enough money in the old kitty to improve upon community engagement through the CACs. I think it is a check, like Zaina said, on the developers, which pretty much are the only people that have any real access to the current city council. The city council, who has been unelected for the last 6 months, has only made lip service about community engagement without making any real effective steps. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And Stormy.
Thank you. The CACs were dismantled before I got on council, but since I've been serving, I've participated in the majority of the ones in District D, regularly attending those meetings and listening in to hear what's, what the concerns of the community are. And as it relates to the Community Engagement Board, all the councilors got an opportunity to nominate somebody for the board. The person I chose is a person who is a very strong advocate for CACs. I think that's a process that we'll be working through to figure out what's going to be the best way to re-engage with the community. And so I've got a person on there who is very interested in reestablishing the CACs, and I'm curious to see what suggestions come out of that board. And I'd be very supportive of whatever the board recommends, but also figuring out some ways to improve community meetings, because I do think it's important for us as city council members to be out in the community and having conversations with folks.
Thank you. Has everyone had an opportunity to respond? The next question centers around priorities for the city. We've already had a great deal of conversation about housing, and so outside of housing, what would you say is the greatest need for the city? And we will start with Megan.
Yes, so my second priority after housing is sustainability. The planet's on fire. We have a climate crisis and we need to act now. We need to act boldly at every level. We have, the city has put forward a community climate action plan, but it's a lot of carrots and not very many sticks. There are some reasons why the city is hamstrung by higher level government, but we can do more. We can access innovation and programs that already exist that are underutilized. Investment in transit where it makes sense to invest in transit. so that people can use alternate modalities to get around the town, but then also investment in people who still need to be in their cars, finding the things in their districts that don't haul them across the city, smart mixed use so that people can walk their kid to daycare and then only have to drive to work and not have to drive across the city. So sustainability is, I hear the cough. I can't see your face. I guess I've used my time. Sustainability for me. Thanks.
Thank you. Portia, outside of housing, what would you say is the city's, what would be the next greatest priority for you?
Ms. Leach, my second priority is equity in pay. Many people are still making the minimum wage of $7.25 an hour. I support raising at least $15 an hour for our citizens. When people have an income, they're better able to take care of their family. I believe that if we take such action, we will be able to keep people employed. They will be able to find a decent place to live. They will be able to keep food on their table and provide clothing and other necessary needs that a family has. I guarantee you right now, me, myself, and I would not be able to live on $7.25 an hour. That is my next priority. Thank you.
Thank you. Corey.
So for me, it's about economic opportunities. Those economic opportunities are connected to transit, making sure that people have a means to get to a job or, go shopping and not have to worry about car insurance or worry about, repairs on a car. We have to make our communities design in a way that, right now, if you live in Southeast Raleigh outside the Beltline and you want to go to the grocery store that's not a Food Lion, you have to go to Nightdale or you have to go to Garner. We have to find ways to change that model. And that comes with working with the community as well as working with the developers that some people seem to just not like. We have to find some common ground and working. So economic development, economic opportunities, and tying our young people to that as well is what I will focus on going forward.
Thank you. Mr. Lee?
Yeah, so we need to do something about the traffic problem that we have in Raleigh. And the way we go about that is by moving away from being car dependent and moving towards a community-centric city. So we need to work towards building and developing walkable, dense neighborhoods on major transit corridors. We need to work on investing and expanding our public transit opportunities, such as the BRT lines, and look into rail lines. And we need to do what we can to, promote walkability throughout the city of Raleigh to ensure that people are able to, walk to the nearest grocery store or school in their neighborhood. But on top of that, we also have to focus on our small business economy, especially in the aftermath of the COVID-19 pandemic. So, providing grants and opportunities for entrepreneurs that want to set up and maintain a small business in the city of Raleigh. I think that is crucial, and we need to do what we can to be more incorporating of, foreign language speakers who want to open up and maintain a small business here as well.
Thank you. Frank Fields.
Much like the other people in this group, I believe that bolstering the public transit system is what we need to focus on. The reason why I believe that is because I think that has the most effect than anything that we can think of. And what I mean by that is the effect is we get people who are able to get on buses and go get job hunting opportunities, right? If we get people getting job hunting opportunities, we get people off the streets, which would essentially reduce crime. But what we'll also do is fix our traffic situation with people pouring into Raleigh the way they're pouring in. We have a traffic situation that's going to get worse. So I think bolstering our public transit system is what we need to do the most.
Thank you. Mary?
Great question. Well, as the environmental candidate, I would believe sustainable development is something that I think is most important, because I think sustainable development is something that hits on everything people have been talking about, from transportation justice, making sure we have lines that can reach people and that people can use them, and that they work for people in ways that aren't displacing people like we've seen across the city with things that have happened. It's a sustainable development that works for affordable housing and making sure that we have a supply of housing for the people who do live and work here. It's including ways for people to be engaged in the processes of things that are happening in their neighborhood and how we are building a future that works for everybody. It's looking into the future and making sure that we don't have developers that are coming here and not doing environmental impact statements that are like really affecting or representing the ways that it could impact our drinking water, our water quality, our stormwater management. So all of these things tying into like the future of development and how it is sustainable and equitable, from the lens of the environment to the people, and then back out to what we're trying to do more of as far as building communities that work for everybody.
Thank you. Wanda?
So my second priority would be community engagement. As an elected official, you're elected to represent a group of people. And how do you represent that group of people if you don't have established community engagement, which we don't have right now? So we need that direct connect to the people, because that gives us the platform on what we need to be talking about. We're talking about housing because people have said housing is an issue. We're talking about transit because people have said transit is an issue. We're talking about pay and wage and equity and things of that nature because people have said these are issues. So how else better to represent the people without having a direct contact and having community engagement? Community engagement is the next thing that needs to be a priority in our city.
Thank you. Todd?
Yes, beyond housing, on the growth and infrastructure point, I think the question is not will we change and grow here in Raleigh, but will we make more and better choices to grow in a more thoughtful and well-planned way. So besides taking decisive action on housing, I think we do need to advance transit and other forms of infrastructure to accommodate the new growth. And I think we need to protect and restore our environment while we grow. We don't have to choose between economic prosperity and environmental protection. And then I would add my next priority on that would be around public safety. I think we need to put this de-escalation policy in place sooner than later. I think we also need to expand the Acorns Crisis Intervention Unit to assist the unhoused, those suffering from mental illness and other vulnerable populations, and strengthen our investment and our partnerships in crime prevention.
Thank you. Christina?
Thank you. Thank you so much. With housing being the biggest concern, I definitely agree with both Wanda and Mary. I'd start off with community engagement because I think that everything stems, just like Wanda said, I'd like to amplify that it stems out of conversation with community, something that we don't have right now. So we're listening to a select few and what they want to do and not what the community wants. And then on the sustainability side, I sit on the Parks Board on the Sustainability Committee, and we have advocated for biophilic cities, which means we're incorporating nature and design with development. So it's not that we don't like developers. It is that we want to work with them to make a future that is sustainable for my children to have a beautiful experience in Raleigh, just like I've done. Thank you.
Thank you. Frank Pierce?
So one of them would be, community engagement to make sure that we're taking care of our communities and everything. But mainly it would be increasing the pay for all of our city employees. Our firemen are at the point of breaking. They have worked themselves to the bone. After talking with most of them, a lot of them are just thinking about quitting, being a firefighter overall, just because of how they've been treated. Our garbage men are underpaid. There are so many city services where they can't even live in Raleigh. More than 40% of city people do not live in this route. We need to make sure that we're taking care of everyone that's employed by the city and make sure that they have a wage so that they can stay in the place that they live. So that would be my second most important thing to work on after affordable housing.
Thank you. Stormy?
Thank you for the question. I would say a lot of people have touched on transit. I think that's very important. But I would also say that infrastructure is really important. we've got I get a lot of inquiries from folks who want to figure out how to do more sidewalk expansion in the district. And we need to come up with a way to make sure we can make that affordable. I get a lot of folks who talk to me about stormwater issues. Our current system was designed when we had about 40 or 50,000 people. We're now up to 400,000 people in the city of Raleigh. So we've had a lot of growth. We've had a lot of development, but we really need to figure out how to do better stormwater improvements throughout the city. Certainly, as we're talking about transportation expansion, how do we make improvements with our road systems, particularly in areas that are going to be more rapidly being developed and don't necessarily have the street structure to accommodate that type of development. So I would say overall, we really need to take a look at our infrastructure to make sure we are accommodating the growth as we do a lot of the expansion in the city.
Joshua.
Everything people brought up, transportation is important. Community engagement is probably number one. Paying the city employees a livable wage, not a $15 wage. We're talking $22, $25 an hour. The thing that hasn't been said yet, and I'm sure, well, it has actually, is we need to redesign how we do public safety, and not just Raleigh, but in the entire city. Statistically, the only way that you're going to really lower crime is to reduce the poverty rate. We don't do that by pushing people out. We do that by diverting funds from the largest budget item in the city and put it into the communities to help lift people out of poverty. And we do that by expanding Acorns and make it less associated with the police. It's part of public safety, but you don't need a cop all the time. And really focusing on trying to help the people instead of worrying about the investor class and the people that are living in nice homes and the people that sell those developers' homes. I mean, they're doing okay. Businesses are okay. And we need to work on the people. Thank you. Over.
Thank you. Jennifer.
Thank you. I think everyone has mentioned really important issues. To me, I think it's about getting back to the basics. It's about how we build our city together with that engagement, but also thinking about when I look at my own family's budget, it's about housing, it's about transportation, how I get somewhere, and it's about how we feed our family. I have a track record on all of those issues, advocating for affordable housing and more housing supply. I serve on the Raleigh Transit Authority, and I've been a long-term advocate for bus rapid transit and walkability to our bus line. I ride the bus regularly. I'm one of the few candidates that does. And I am a long advocate for increasing our ability to not just have grocery store access in neighborhoods, but also the ability to grow our own food in our city, which is the key to living sustainably. All of those things together not only help working families afford to live here because they hit the major parts of their budget, but they also help us with our climate goals so that our children can continue to live here over time.
Thank you. Zainab.
I believe that everything also falls under ridding corruption. So I believe that in order to grow into a more ethically valued city, we cannot have a council that benefits financially off the decisions that they vote on. There's just no way to have a just community engagement system without it. And I really feel like attitude reflects leadership. So you can't really talk about the corruption without, talk about how the city perpetuates that in the prison industrial complex. So we saw in 2020, RPD was completely militarized. They used expired tear gas on the people of Raleigh, which broke international law. And we also know that our previous police chief trained in the apartheid state of Israel with a known Islamophobic group. This type of training continues the cycle of over-policing and militarization of our police force. And I believe that, without ridding the corruption that exists, without ridding, the root causes, I don't believe we have a few bad apples. I believe we have a bad tree. And so in here, both ridding the corruption in council and the police force is necessary in order to also have a proper community engagement process.
Thank you. Anne?
Yes, I think that I want to see a combination of density for housing that is paired with frequent transit and access to public green space. That's the combo that can make a difference for the quality of life going forward and affordability for people at many different levels. The tools to develop those plans collaboratively are really not in place. Very few people can respond to a piece of paper that comes in the mail that says across the street is going to be this. They need building blocks, they need Legos, whatever it takes, so people can talk about the things that matter, which is the scale, and does it fit, and does it allow community values to be respected? Those are things we can talk about if we get the right tools together, and I'd like to help with that. We've got a challenge of hotspots, and it hasn't popped up as heavily as it will. But guess what? Those hotspots overlay the same areas where poor people live, and they offer tremendous opportunity for redevelopment and for showing the world that you can actually green up your areas and provide a benefit for your people broadly. Our people will do that. I'm not counting on government alone. Lots of work. And I do support money for our workers getting enough that they can live in the city of Raleigh. It's going to take several cycles to do that, but let's do it.
Thank you. Jonathan?
Thanks. Reducing car dependency, I think, would be my second priority. You should not need a car to get around in the city of Raleigh. It increases costs. It's bad for the environment. It ties directly to housing because land use is really important to making sure that transit and multimodal transportation work. So that's big investments, like making sure that our buses are frequent and reliable and fare-free, and that there are shelters and benches. It's planning for commuter rail, bus rapid transit, and then small things like sidewalks to make sure you can get to your bus stop or to your park. Safe ways to share the road with folks who are wheelchair users or pushing a stroller or riding a bike or a scooter. And so I think that's a really important piece when we talk about growing sustainably. And it's something I've really tried to focus on since I've been on city council. I agree with a lot of what I've heard here also, but that would be my big second priority.
Thank you. And Catherine.
Thanks, Michael. So for me, it would be infrastructure improvement and expansion. So the decisions that we make today about stormwater management, green canopies, right? Access to parks, walkability, public transportation, sewage treatment, right? Like the very kind of sometimes unsexy issues, those decisions we make about those issues now are going to determine what Raleigh looks like in 2050. And so we need to make sure that we are making the decisions now that are going to serve the city as it grows, that are going to meet the needs of the citizens of tomorrow, right? Our kids, hopefully, and our future neighbors. But I would also want to do that working with the new office, the new DEI office, to also identify places in our city that have been historically underinvested in from an infrastructure perspective, to make sure that we are doing that equitably as well, and that we are catching up in places that have not gotten the benefit of city investment.
Thank you. Our final question will come from Richard Moore.
Okay. Just about in all the districts there, Raleigh Housing Authority units and so forth. What are some things that you're doing or propose to do if elected to address the situation of those who are living in Raleigh Housing Authority public housing? And also there are those who are coming from homeless though, but they're spending
I'm sorry, Richard, we lost much of what you said.
Amount of their rent.
Okay, Richard, I'm sorry. Richard,
basically, what are you doing?
Richard, are you with us?
Yeah, I thought so.
I'm sorry, Richard, can you restate your question?
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, all right. I'll tell you what, let me turn my video off also. Okay, so my question is this. Most of you have, or just about all, you have some Raleigh Housing Authority public housing units in your area. What are you doing to, or what do you propose to do to make sure or to take care of that population and see that their needs are addressed and they're not treated as marginalized citizens?
Stormy?
Thank you for the question. Somebody just popped up on the chat that Jane didn't answer the last question. I don't know if that's something that needs to be addressed or not. But I'll take this one. So in my district, one of the major Raleigh Housing Authority properties is the Heritage Park area. I've had a number of conversations with the members of the board and their leadership about what's being proposed as a part of that new development. Basically, they're on a transit corridor. They're on the outskirts of downtown, be close to Dix Park, close to NC State. So there are a number of opportunities for folks that work there, be able to access transit and have a walkable lifestyle. But what they're proposing is not necessarily the most visionary plan. Certainly having some opportunities for commercial spaces there would be great for small minority-owned businesses. But that is also a place that would be great for density because as we know, affordable housing right now is the housing stock is really decreasing. So if we can make that particular development more dense and provide more affordable housing opportunities and figure out a way, over in Durham, they've come up with some creative ways of doing it. They have low income or 30% AMI folks, but they also have some market rate folks. And so they can figure out how to make the numbers work so that you have a better opportunity to get folks who are on the lower income portion of the scale more housing opportunities. And so I've had that conversation with their leadership about how do we expand it and make that a better, development process for folks in the city. Thank you.
Thank you. Jane, I do apologize for my oversight. We will give you an opportunity to address this issue. Following this question, will you state what your second priority would be?
Yeah, I'll just roll it all in. Thanks. So in District D, we have 7 RHA properties, so Raleigh Housing Authority properties that I'm aware of. So we have Heritage Park, we have Glenwood Towers, Walnut Terrace, Carriage House, Kentwood, and Mayview. And I have met with the Heritage Park Residents Council. This is a group of residents that are coming together to try to stay informed and up to date on what the changes are coming. I know with that redevelopment of that property, it's a scary time for folks who live there. Many are excited because they might get a much better place to live as it redevelops, but some are also unsure whether, will it be their home? And so I think we have to really stay engaged with residents of these housing developments as these changes are being made, because this affects their every day, where their kids go to school, how they get to work, whether they're going to have access. And, Glenwood Towers, this is a senior living facility on Glenwood Avenue. These are, communities where, they wouldn't be able to afford any of the market rates in that area, but it's wonderful from a transit standpoint, from a getting to work standpoint, from being connected to your community long term. And so these are communities that I have sought to develop relationships with so that I understand what they are needing. And that is my intent as a counselor, is to be available, to listen, to be responsive to people, even who, don't attend a council meeting or don't send me an email. That is my goal. In terms of other priorities, all of what was said on infrastructure is very critical. Sidewalks, stormwater, commuter rail, bike lanes. As we develop, if we do not take care of our infrastructure, what are we developing for? And I want to go back to the way that we develop. This has to be community centered, and we have to have a vision about what it is we want. In many of these large scale redevelopment projects, we're not getting affordable housing. We have the ability to negotiate as city leaders, and I want to see that. When Downtown South was approved by this council, we could have gotten more. 150 acres, 40-story buildings. This is going to change District D. And I want to see all of District D get to benefit, all of the city get to benefit from these large scale changes.
Thank you. Richard, can you restate your question for the panel?
Okay, basically, people who live in public housing in your districts, what are you doing to take care of those families that are in public housing and so forth? And I'll just leave it at that. So hopefully you heard me.
Thank you. Joshua?
Yes, public housing, we need to do what we can to make sure that the people that that live in it have a voice on the housing authority. We should appoint people that live there onto the housing authority, since they should have some control in how they're doing. HUD provides for resident councils that we should encourage and try to get set up in everyone, which by statute would make sure they had representation on the housing authority board. And I think that we should, when we focus on housing affordability and people that are in public housing, we should expand public housing, because if you're going to build a house, you build it on a strong foundation. The foundation of the city is the people that do the work that are making less money, and we need to invest in the people that need to have the most needs first, and then build up from there. But I think that by appointing people to the housing board authority that are currently live there or should happen, and we should make sure that they're represented by people that understand the scope of what they're dealing with. Over. Thanks.
You're on mute, Michael.
I'm sorry, Zainab.
She left.
She
She
had
was
to leave
missing
to
her
go.
prayer time.
Yeah, she was missing prayer time, so she had to leave.
Certainly. Frank Pierce.
Yes, so one of the most important things on city council that we need to be addressing is that we need to make sure that we're going after all three levels of affordable housing. And in these areas, we can help by building more of the 30%, 50%, and 80% AMI in one unit to help alleviate costs and things of that matter. As for working in the community in those areas during the pandemic, I helped deliver food. I helped raise money to house people in hotels during the pandemic to help with those things, and making sure that we're reaching out to those communities on a weekly basis to see what they need, because they are underserved and they are mistreated most of the time. We need to make sure that we're visiting them and actually going out to them and finding out what they need for help and helping them with what they need.
Thank you. Ann?
Yes, thank you for the question. I'm very concerned that if we build market rate housing that includes affordable units and we make it too tall, that the subsidy for those units gets to be much bigger piece of the pie. If you get above 6 or 7 stories, then you're paying for additional elevators, additional parking, additional fire protection, et cetera. And all of those cost money. And I think if you keep it at a scale that somewhat reduces the overall height of the buildings for multifamily housing, it should make it easier to provide an amount, a proportion that should be built in. I'm thinking it ought to be at least 20% of everything that gets built, not just where public housing is. That's one of the places, but we could ask for 20% wherever we're doing multifamily housing or wherever we're doing a major renovation of land use. Ask for 20% at maybe it's 50%, maybe it's 60 AMI. I'm not sure what that number needs to be, but we've got to get the scale right. And we also have to partner with the county and nonprofits so that we can be sure that people who get moved out have a place to go before their building gets taken down.
Thank you, Ann. Mr. Lee?
Yes, well, there's no doubt that public housing provides, essential housing for people who need it, low-income communities. I think the way we go about this is by expanding and increasing the amount of community funding and investments that we put it towards housing, affordable housing. And we also need to look into increasing our community land trusts. But on top of that, I think another thing we have to focus on is redefining this sense of home ownership and not, letting people know that home ownership is not just a single family detached house. Home ownership can be condos, townhouses, duplexes, and whatnot. And I think that's the key right there that we need to focus on.
Thank you. Jonathan?
Yes, thank you. I agree with everything that Stormy said. And I would add that I've also had conversations with board members for the Housing Authority and talked to them about ways that we can introduce more mixed of uses in these communities. So goods and services closer to where people live, things that people need, which I think helps with reducing car dependency and costs. So having some sort of grocery on site or coffee shop on site, a model like Place at the Table where folks can work for their meals or volunteer as well, I think that would make a lot of sense. So I think going to the community, figuring out what they need and being able to place those goods and services in the locations where folks live, I think that's really important. I know there's some challenges with the funding models for these types of neighborhoods, and when you introduce a mix of uses that may interrupt some of the funding, but I think we can make it work.
Thank you. Catherine, please.
Thank you. Yeah, so I spent several years as one of the founding board members for Carol's Kitchen, an entrepreneurial nonprofit that hired women who were coming out of having experienced homelessness and incarceration and got fairly familiar with the difficulty, right, in actually finding safe, reliable housing through public housing application processes. We simply don't have enough. We need more of it. We also need more help for people to navigate, right, the actual bureaucracy of applying for and getting approved for this housing. I think that the city has opportunities to partner more with the Raleigh Housing Authority in terms of planning development and improvements to those properties and around them in a way that centralizes community instead of treating them as something that's supposed to be kind of off in a corner and not connected, but instead say, these are vital parts of our communities. These are people who are vulnerable members who deserve our support, our attention, our care, and for us to come alongside and ask, what do you need? And I would love to see more work with nonprofits in engaging with that space.
Thank you. Jennifer, please.
Thanks. Definitely an excellent question. My own family is in that 60%-ish range of AMI, so my bank account can certainly tell you that I sympathize with anyone who has trouble affording their bills each month. I think that RHA is an essential service because of that, because we have families who need support from our community. And we will have projects like Heritage Park that need to be reimagined. What is the definition of public housing and what does it look like? And having a vision that includes full service for people as a continuum, for people that are unhoused into housing and out of housing if they have that privilege, but also for the other things that I've mentioned, the basics that they need is really important. So we have the opportunity, the next council will, to reimagine some of those projects in the same way that Councilor Fort has said, and looking at Heritage Park's redevelopment as an opportunity. And that will come up for multiple sites, I think, throughout our city over the next cycle.
Thank you. Wanda?
Rich, I think your question was, what are you doing?
Let me clarify. Richard, can you restate your question, please?
Okay, I said, and I had to rush, and forgive me of the technical difficulties, but I did say, ask what are you doing, but also what also do you propose to do going forward as well to take care of those in public housing and to make sure they're not marginalized. And where I'm coming from is I've had various conversations with people in public housing, and one lady, she was deathly afraid of having to move from one place to the other, and they seemed to be that, and she was just felt marginalized because she was just picked up and said, you go here, like she was treated like a number. And she had a family, she had children. Some of those people are now trying to step out and step up. Kids going to community college, trying to improve, but they feel very marginalized. Very slow response when there's a shot in their home. And so I'm talking about a little bullet shot. So want to know, what are you doing currently, those who are serving, but then also what do you propose to do going forward?
Thank you.
Go ahead, Wanda. First and foremost, I think educating the community, going into those communities and building relationships, letting them know what their rights are and what protections they actually have as worthy residents of the city, and even being a part of public housing. That is what we did in Heritage Park. That is how they were able to fight back from the tear down of Heritage Park and require the Raleigh Housing Authority Board to come to the table to help them reimagine what their community would look like. And the thing that that I think is pivotal about this particular Heritage Park is now we want to talk about density. But when Walnut Terrace and Halifax Court had mixed income, which displaced numerous families that were low income at that point in time, we didn't talk about density then. We didn't talk about density to include those folks that were low income at that point in time, and housing was still a crisis at that point in time. So we didn't talk about it then, but now we want to take Heritage Park because it's close to Dix Park. So we want to have the wealthy folk come over to Dix Park and be able to walk to Dix Park and all these other things. And we want to invest all this money in parks. But my thing is, when housing is a crisis, there is no time to play.
Thank you. Corey?
So I have had multiple conversations with board members on the Raleigh Housing Authority. I think one of the major things we talk about redevelopment, but we need the Raleigh Housing Authority to build something new. They haven't had new development in a while. We have a housing shortage. Everyone can agree we have a housing shortage. So we need the Raleigh Housing Authority to find ways to develop new housing. So give people a start. It's all about getting started and moving forward. But it's also not just the Raleigh Housing Authority. I know as a city, we worked to protect some of our other affordable housing projects across the city. One in particular, Raleigh North Apartments. We renewed that 30-year lease and everything. And out of that, some residents have had the ability to become first-time home buyers through another city program. So connecting those city programs for first-time home buyers, looking to develop new housing, working with the Raleigh Housing Authority and other nonprofits. That is what is needed. I mean, even the Habitat. Yes, sir.
Thank you. Megan?
Yes, thank you. I think so much of what has already been said is really poignant. I think increasing representation of people living in those homes to represent themselves is really important. I also think making sure that people can access essential services near where they live is important for all folks who live in our city, not just market rate folks, not just public housing folks, all folks. I think making sure that wraparound services are robustly available for anyone who needs them, and also making sure that the tools nearby housing that access to the next step of housing is also available. So things like robust funding for first-time home buyer, like down payment assistance, and other tools like that. So there's a lot to be done to make it that's not just about housing.
Thank you. Todd?
Yes, I think from a service perspective, I had the pleasure of working for a number of years with Resources for Seniors in a program that took me to Glenwood Towers very frequently to work with the residents there. I've also served on the DHIC Affordable Housing Board, as well as on the Family Selection Committee for Wake County Habitat for Humanity. In terms of taking care of the existing population, I do think we need to ensure there are adequate resources for upkeep of those properties. And put pressure on the RWA when there are gaps, RHA when there are gaps. Wraparound services was mentioned. I absolutely think that's essential to help with childcare, provide connections to jobs, economic opportunities, and other services that also keep them in those houses. And we also need to think about these properties when we are planning new transit, infrastructure, parks, and so forth. We can't leave them out of that planning process. And then in terms of building more public housing, I think there's lots to be done there. RHA was mentioned, but I also think we need to look for ways to preserve naturally occurring affordable housing.
Thank you. Portia?
Thank you for the opportunity. What I'm doing, I am on the front line, meeting and talking with citizens that are struggling. We have to come up with a plan to look after the people that are in the public housing. They are feeling devalued and dehumanized because their needs are not being met. It's like they're stuck in a place, they're stuck there, they can't get out. And we need to be careful as to how we judge people. Everybody in public housing is not lazy or does not want to take care of themselves. There are situations that put them in those places. I can recall a few years back where I was almost homeless and may have ended in that predicament. So we've got to go in, meet with those people on a regular basis, help them deal with issues. Some of the office managers accrual. I had to deal with some of that even through COVID. Mr. Leach, I had to leave my comfortable home and go out and struggle with the people to help them that were being evicted. We hold the cards in our hands. The city developers, the developers and the city needs to work together to make sure that whatever we build, we're looking after all of our citizens. Thank you.
Thank you. Frank Fields.
I want to first say I agree with everything everyone said today. Like many of the people on this panel, we went to the at Macedonia Church and Martin Street Baptist Church. We went to the Raleigh Housing Crisis meetings. And the number one thing I noticed that we were having a problem with is city outreach. And what I mean by that is the city, Wake County, and even the feds have given money and created programs to help people in these situations, but they didn't know about it. And even if, and then we would say stuff like, well, just go to the website or just pull it up. If somebody's about to get kicked out of their home, if they're living in housing projects and they're getting kicked out of their home, they may not have access to internet. They may not have access to get on their phone and say, let me go to the website and figure out how to get help. So I think we have a lot of programs in place that are great here in Raleigh, but they didn't know about it. That's all I heard. Every meeting we ever went to was, I don't know how to do it. I don't know what to do. Let's meet people. So we got to be more intentional in meeting people where they are, right? We cannot just say, well, it's on the website. If you want to get help, do it. So I agree with everything everybody said, but I think the biggest thing we need to do is outreach, getting to the people and meeting them where they are to get them the information they need.
Christina.
Thank you so much for that question. Again, amplifying a lot of the things that have been said, something that sticks out to me is that I think about elements of inclusionary zoning. So we've talked about getting rid of exclusionary zoning. And when I mention things, or when it is mentioned like it was in the mayoral debate or meeting right before this, that inclusionary zoning is illegal. And I challenge that because I say we can do hard things. As council, we are there to help change those rules so that we can allow for multiple and multi-level income like Durham has done, and challenging those and working with that. If we can change the law to give ourselves an extra year on council, then I think we can change the law to make sure that more people have access to affordable housing and can be involved in our city. So I really want to see what are the things we can do to make sure that each development moving forward has everyone moving in it, instead of separating and saying, okay, here's an affordable housing unit and here is a 40-story tower for the rich. We need to be able to combine those and make sure that we're all living together and growing together as a city.
Thank you. Mary?
Yeah, I think listening, learning, and being in right relationships is a big part of it. I think we can take a point from something that Terrence Ruth said during the mayoral forum right before this, that the people closest to the problem should be closest to the power. So I mirror a lot of the things that were said specifically about like having people on the housing authority and having people like that are in these spaces be able to have a seat at the table that represents what they need to have done. The city also has a history of selling public lands to developers and then hoping that the developers are going to put it in affordable housing. And as we've seen, they would rather put $600 or 600 square foot units priced at $1,500 a month. So, and you know, one of the things that Christina said that I've been thinking about is like, yes, inclusionary zoning policies necessarily aren't where they need to be, but it's like as city council people, we can be doing more, pushing for more, and more can be done to have policies that do represent people that are mixed incomes, that can like create cities that work for people to be able to live, as well as like filling in the gaps of where people can be as far as like having the role of nonprofits and other groups that are coming in to help with the process of like instituting something that is more just for the people.
Thank you. And have I left anyone off? Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the Raleigh Wake Citizens Association Impact, thank you for taking time to be with us this evening. We know that this has been a long process and we appreciate you offering yourselves up for the position that you're seeking. Again, thank you, and we wish you a great evening and a good night.
Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you, guys. See
Thank
later.
you so much.
And Richard.
Moderator Leach, do you want me to bring up the final candidates for soil and water?
Yes, and I'm not sure if we have anybody.
Yes, Jenna Wadsworth is on.
Thank you.
Yes.
Do we have the candidate for soil and water?
I'm here.
Thank
I
you
hope
for
can hear
joining.
me.
I can, I'm sorry. Thank you so much for joining us. We will provide a minute for you to do introductions. Following your introduction, we will ask you questions and we will alternate asking those questions. Jenna, you can begin.
Well, I want to start by saying, hey, y'all, thank you so much for having me tonight. And thank you to the North Carolina Black Alliance and the Panhellenic Council and RWCA for hosting this event. My name is Jenna Wadsworth. I grew up on a hog, cow, chicken, corn, cotton, tobacco, and soybean farm on a dirt road in Johnston County, a farm that I still run with my daddy to this day. I'm proud to call Raleigh home. And I am proud to have been, I'm the vice chair of the Wake County Soil and Water Conservation District Board of Supervisors. It's a mouthful no matter how many years I've been saying it. And I've been serving over 1.1 million people for 12 years now. And all that time I've maybe missed 2 meetings. So I'm committed, I've been doing this work. I have been thankful to have the endorsement of RWCA in the past, I believe for all my races, as well as when I was the 2020 Democratic nominee for North Carolina Commissioner of Agriculture. So I know how important the work y'all do is. And, my mission has really been to work to create a more just, sustainable, and equitable future that works for every single person that calls Wake County home.
Thank you. Jenna, I'll ask you the first question. What has been your greatest accomplishments during your last term?
Oh my goodness. So I am so proud of the work we've done, and I'm going to geek out a little bit because I really, really love and believe in this work. So it's a nonpartisan board, and the mission of the Soil and Water District is to conserve and preserve the natural resources of Wake County, including wildlife. And we do that by working with public and private landowners, by creating relationships and partnerships and financial partnerships and incentive work through the county, the state, the federal government, and other outside partners. But we do so much more than that. We do a lot of work around environmental education programming, which I'll talk about in just a second, because that's some of the work that I am the most proud of. But we also do work around environmental education in our public and private schools with our children. We do that through our Envirothon program, which helps middle and high schoolers learn about conservation resources and create the future stewards of our resources, right? I think that that's some of the most meaningful work that we do, and funding that work, because our children truly are our future. And, as other candidates said tonight, we are in a climate crisis. So it's absolutely imperative that we're making sure that our children have all the tools necessary to be able to address that head on. We also do work through the Resource Conservation Workshop. This past year, we funded over 12 students to go to a week-long camp at NC State to teach them about careers in conservation so they could do hands-on work. We also work with our farmers. We're the first line and really one of the only lines of defense for our agricultural community here in Wake County. People may not realize that we still have over 600 farms on over 70,000 acres of land. And while everyone in the state is seeing major farmland loss, North Carolina is one of the top states in the country for that. And the reality is people want to call Wake County home. It's exciting that people want to do that. That means that we're doing a lot of things right. And so we're seeing this increased development. We're seeing, growth of over a net growth of over a kindergarten classroom full of new people per day. But with that comes the challenges that come with, equitable development, sustainable development, making sure that people aren't being forced out of their homes through gentrification, that people have the environmental resources necessary to have parks, open space, sustainability, and that we're still growing local foods. And so we work with our farmers to make sure that they can keep the farms that have been in their families for generation, to reduce land loss by keeping our farmers in place. That helps create more sustainable opportunities for everybody. And the other thing I'll say is most people don't realize there are 44 total watersheds in Wake County. And of those, 21 are drinking water watersheds. I'm sorry. I don't know if you're popping me out. It's really important, the work that we do in soil and water, to make sure that your drinking water is clean.
Certainly. Jenna, you've talked a great deal about what you've been able to accomplish this past term. So my next question would be, what do you hope to accomplish in your next term if elected?
So we've also done a number of things since I was elected that hadn't ever been done before. First of all, we've gotten multiple conservation easements that will help preserve this land for generations to come. So it will stay in farmland. We've given the resources for farmers to do that. We've also worked with historically majority minority communities and economically underserved communities, which has been a big focus of my work. Just recently, we have started a partnership with the Juniper Level Missionary Baptist Church and the Juniper Level Baptist Community Alliance. I don't know if y'all are familiar with them. They're the ones that helped to restore the Rosenwald School. We are now working with them on their development and creation of a wetland observatory and educational center in the Panther Branch community, which I think will be incredible for this community. 10 years out, we're going to have children being able to enjoy resources in an area that continually is facing gentrification. We've also done work in Southeast Raleigh. Recently, we run the Big Sweep environmental cleanups that help to clean out trash and recyclables out of your drinking water. This past spring, we actually have cleaned over 26,000 pounds of trash and recyclables out of your drinking water alone. And 3,000 of those pounds of trash and recyclables came out of Chavis, the waters near Chavis Park. And so making sure that we're cleaning up Southeast Raleigh and being good stewards and also being good neighbors. And I think sometimes that's not always work that you see done from our county level government. And so we're really reaching into communities that traditionally haven't been involved maybe with environmental work and saying, hey, you know what, there's a place for everybody. And we also, and I know as an elected official, it is my job to work to serve every single person who calls this community home. I don't care what your zip code is. I don't care how much money you have in the bank. As a working class person, as someone who is disabled, who's a member of the LGBTQ community, who understands what it's like to not always have other people who are like me serving in political office. I think it's really important that we are amplifying voices that traditionally are not heard.
Thank you. Jenna, our next two questions will come from Richard Moore.
Okay, all right. So you're our only candidate here, so I do want to ask you this. What are some things that we should be most concerned about going forward in terms of soil and conservation? And it could be, directly affecting by your office, or things that we should look at as we consider we're going to the polls and so forth even with other candidates.
That is a great question. And I'm so grateful that you've given me the opportunity to address it. First, in general, I think making sure that we have a candidate who understands the severity of the climate crisis is absolutely imperative. I am the only one who is that person who is running. I also have a long history of speaking for social justice and equity, whether it's in agriculture or in any other aspect politically. Like I said, RWCA endorsed me in my 2020 race when I was running against Steve Troxler for Commissioner of Agriculture. I think it's clear I was the most progressive candidate that's ever run statewide, talking about issues like marijuana legalization, social justice, school to prison pipeline, talking about food insecurity, talking about what justice for Black farmers. Those are all still work. That's still work and concerns and issues that I'm deeply passionate about addressing, no matter what office I'm holding. And I think that's something that we would want to have in any of our elected officials, someone who is authentic, someone who will speak out and who will say the things that may not be popular, but who will do what is right and who has that kind of guiding light. Amongst the people who are running, there are 5 candidates, including myself, for soil and water. And yes, there are up to 2 seats that are available this cycle on the ballot. And I will say, of all the 5 of us, only one other candidate has ever even attended one soil and water meeting, and not until after they filed for office. I think that it's really important that the people who are running for any office are willing to show up, and not just willing to show up, who have a history of showing up and understanding what it is we do, and caring deeply about this, and not just thinking about this office as some sort of stepping stone. I do, have some reservations and concerns about a number of the people who are running, and I wasn't quite sure if I was going to run this cycle, because I believe in creating space and opportunity to bring in new voices. That's something I've done. I'm the only person that has ever led the appointment of multiple people of color onto our associate board of supervisors, who has fought to be able to do programs in communities that traditionally had been underserved. And of my opponents this cycle, I have someone who works for my 2020 opponent, Steve Troxler, who is running, who, again, this person has never attended a soil and water meeting before, so it feels a bit retaliatory. There is somebody who is a known Trump supporter, a MAGA supporter, who has been in trouble for bringing guns into the town square, and who works for the North Carolina Family Values Coalition, fighting against reproductive rights for women. And I find that deeply concerning and troubling as well. And, again, there are people just who haven't bothered to show up. And I think that when we're talking about our drinking water, when we're talking about educating our children, when we're talking about fighting for clean air, fighting for our farmers who are doing everything they can to fight back against development, to be able to keep this land and continue to grow healthy, nutritious local foods, I think it's really important that we have somebody with a document history of showing up and fighting for people.
Okay. All right. So now this position is kind of far down on the ballot. Okay. So what would you say is, in terms of my last question here, if we had to say something to motivate people to make sure they pay attention to this particular position, what would you say to that? What did you say we could say? I guess.
Fighting for your environment, fighting for farmers, fighting for drinking water, your clean drinking water.
Okay. Okay, Mike. Let's see. Mike, are you on mute?
In the meantime, I will say, if there are any other questions that y'all may have too, I'm more than happy to if you think of questions after the fact, I'm more than happy to answer them.
Yeah. Okay. Let's see. Waiting for. Hey, Mike, are you there?
I am. Jenna, thank you so much for taking time to be with us. We know that this has been a long election cycle, and so we certainly applaud you for offering yourself for a public service. So thank you again for joining us.
Thank you all again for doing this tonight.
Certainly.
Certainly.
Are there any final words that anyone would like to make? Marcus or Richard?
No, I think this has been an excellent experience. I appreciate the opportunity from RWCA to serve on as one of the questioners, panelists, and it's been also educational. I think the people who participated, and not only but those who viewed in, I think got a lot out of this as well. So thank you, and thank you once again to Jenna.
Richard, great closing remarks, and we will end on that note. Thank you, everyone, and have a great night.